It was the kind of moment that nobody saw coming. A room full of Silicon Valley's brightest minds, Tesla's top engineers, and even Elon Musk himself. Everyone was waiting. The atmosphere was tense, as though a great storm was about to hit. The doors swung open, and in walked a boy. Not just any boy, but a 10-year-old. Ethan Lawson, a kid from a quiet suburban neighborhood, had no idea that this was the moment his life would change forever. In fact, he wasn't even supposed to be there. He had spent the last few weeks working feverishly on an idea, an invention, and somehow, it had caught the attention of one of Tesla's senior engineers. Now, he was about to present his idea to the man who had revolutionized electric cars and space travel, Elon Musk. The tension was palpable. How could a child, barely a decade old, possibly have something to say to a group of the world's leading innovators? Ethan's heart was racing, but his eyes were focused. He had something to prove, not just to the people in the room, but to himself. He wasn't here to be dismissed or patronized. He was here to show that sometimes brilliance can come in the most unexpected packages. Elon Musk, who usually carried himself with a cool, almost detached demeanor, raised an eyebrow when he saw the boy walk in. A few of the engineers exchanged puzzled looks. They were used to seeing pitch presentations from experienced professionals, not elementary school kids. Ethan took a deep breath as he stood before them. "Hi, I'm Ethan. I've got something that might change the way we think about self-driving cars," he said, his voice steady, though there was a hint of nervousness. The room fell silent. It wasn't just because of his age. It was the raw confidence in his voice. Ethan pulled up a tablet, tapping the screen with a determination that suggested he had spent countless hours perfecting every detail. On the screen was an interface he had developed, a prototype for an AI system that could drastically improve the decision-making process of autonomous vehicles. The engineers leaned forward, intrigued. Elon, who had seen hundreds of ideas in his lifetime, leaned in as well. He studied the tablet, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed the concept. Then, it happened. Ethan ran a simulation on the AI system. A Tesla Model S appeared on the screen, navigating a busy street, avoiding obstacles, making decisions with a fluidity that was unlike anything the engineers had seen before. The AI system wasn't just predicting actions. It was learning from its environment in real time, adapting in a way that seemed almost alive. For a moment, there was silence. Then Elon Musk, who had seen and heard it all, said something that no one in the room expected. "I've never seen anything like this." The room erupted in astonished murmurs. A 10-year-old had just made one of the world's most innovative tech giants say those words. And it wasn't just because of the kid's age. It was because Ethan had just shown them something they didn't think was possible. The idea he presented wasn't just good, it was groundbreaking. But this wasn't the end of the story. This was just the beginning. What happens when a 10-year-old gets the chance to change the world? Ethan was about to find out. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Ethan Lawson wasn't your average 10-year-old. While other kids his age were busy playing video games or riding bikes around the neighborhood, Ethan spent most of his time with his head buried in books or tinkering with gadgets and computers. He didn't quite fit in with the other kids in his small suburban neighborhood in Mountain View, California. Instead of hanging out at the local park, he was often found building things in his garage, surrounded by piles of spare parts and wires, with only his dog, Max, for company. Ethan's fascination with technology began when he was just 5 years old. It all started with a simple question from his mom. "Ethan, why does the computer screen flicker when you press the keys?" That simple question sparked his curiosity and led him down a rabbit hole of discovering how things worked. He started taking apart old electronics, his mom's toaster, an old radio, even the family vacuum cleaner, just to see what was inside. "I've got to understand how this works," he'd often tell his mom, a statement that always seemed to be followed by a mess of wires, springs, and broken parts. His mother, Lisa, was always supportive, though sometimes a bit overwhelmed. She'd watch him take apart gadgets and put them back together, marveling at his persistence. Lisa was a schoolteacher, and while she didn't fully understand what Ethan was doing, she had always encouraged him to follow his curiosity. She understood that, as a child, Ethan didn't need to know everything right away. The important thing was that he loved learning. But his father, Mark, wasn't as enthusiastic. He was a lawyer, practical, and focused on a more traditional path for Ethan. "You need to focus on your studies, son. Not all of this tinkering," Mark would often say, shaking his head when he saw the mess in the garage. "You're wasting your time." Ethan's dad wanted him to be like other kids, play sports, hang out with friends, focus on his grades. But Ethan wasn't interested in any of that. He didn't care much for traditional schooling or sports. His true passion was in creating and understanding technology, even if it meant going against his father's wishes. His mother, however, always stood by him. "Let him follow his passion," she'd say to Mark. "You never know where it might lead." Ethan didn't mind the tension at home. He found solace in his projects. Whether it was building a small robot from old computer parts or designing a rudimentary AI on his laptop, he found comfort in creating something from nothing. When his classmates were talking about the latest video game releases, Ethan was more interested in learning about the coding that made those games work. He'd spend hours reading up on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and self-driving cars, topics that fascinated him far more than anything else in the world. But there was something deeper behind his obsession with technology. Ethan wanted to change the world. He wanted to show people that there was more to him than just being the kid who sat alone in his room reading about algorithms. He wanted to prove that a 10-year-old could make a real difference, that age wasn't a barrier to innovation. He knew that one day, he'd have the chance to prove himself, but he never expected it to come this soon. In the days leading up to that fateful meeting with Elon Musk, Ethan had been working tirelessly on a project that he was convinced would be revolutionary. It all started when he read an article about Tesla's self-driving cars. Ethan had always been fascinated by the idea of autonomous vehicles, but he also knew there were limitations, big ones. In every article and report he read, he saw the same issue over and over. The technology wasn't perfect. The cars had trouble making real-time decisions in complex environments. They struggled to navigate tight spaces, avoid obstacles in unpredictable situations, and react as quickly as a human driver could. That's when the idea hit him. What if the cars could learn from the world around them, adapt to new situations, and make smarter, more intuitive decisions? What if they could evolve with experience, much like the way a human brain learns over time? Ethan spent weeks sketching out ideas, writing code, and experimenting with different algorithms. His goal was simple but ambitious. Create an AI system for self-driving cars that could think, learn, and react more intelligently than anything that existed at the time. He worked in secret, in his bedroom, with Max curled up by his side. The world outside didn't matter. All that mattered was the code, the algorithms, and the vision he had for a smarter, safer future for autonomous vehicles. But Ethan never expected that his breakthrough would catch the attention of someone like Elon Musk, someone who could help bring his vision to life in a way he couldn't even imagine. For all of Ethan's passion and brilliance, home life wasn't always easy. His mom, Lisa, was supportive, sometimes a little too supportive. She'd watch with pride as Ethan spent hours in the garage, immersed in his projects. But Ethan's dad, Mark, didn't share the same enthusiasm. Mark was a man of logic, structure, and tradition. He believed that success came from following the well-established path. To him, that meant doing well in school, playing sports, and eventually, landing a solid job that would lead to a comfortable life. The unconventional way Ethan was spending his time seemed frivolous to Mark. "I don't get it, Lisa. Why does he spend all his time on these gadgets? He's not going to get anywhere with this," Mark would say over dinner, shaking his head as he scanned the evening news. Lisa would try to explain Ethan's passion, her voice gentle but firm. "Mark, he's just curious. He's learning, and that's what matters most right now. Let him explore his interests. He's still a kid." But Mark couldn't see beyond the unconventional methods. Learning, huh? So, is he learning how to build robots to fix our car? Or is he learning how to make a real living? Mark's tone was sharp, frustration bubbling up. It wasn't that Mark didn't love his son. He did, more than anything. But he had this vision of how Ethan should be growing up. He didn't want his son to be an outlier, the kid who was always different. It scared him to think that Ethan might one day grow up and feel like an outsider. Mark didn't want that. He wanted Ethan to have stability. He wanted him to be the kid who got straight A's, joined a soccer team, and had lots of friends. But Ethan had never been that kid. Ethan's friends at school didn't understand him either. Most of them were content with spending their afternoons playing soccer or video games, but Ethan always felt like an outsider. He preferred to read books about artificial intelligence or watch documentaries about space exploration. While other kids dreamed of becoming astronauts or famous athletes, Ethan dreamt of creating something that would change the world, a piece of technology that could make life better for everyone. He wasn't trying to be different. He just was. And that bothered him. It bothered him that his classmates didn't see the world the way he did. It bothered him that his father didn't understand why he spent so much time working on things that felt important to him. One evening, after dinner, Ethan found himself in a familiar situation. His dad was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through paperwork from his law firm, while Lisa was cleaning up the dishes. Ethan had been working on his AI project all afternoon, tweaking the code and running tests, but his dad wasn't impressed. "You know, Ethan," Mark began, his voice quieter than usual, "maybe you should focus more on your math homework. You're falling behind in your grades. This tech stuff? It's a nice hobby, but it won't get you anywhere in life." Ethan stiffened. His fingers clenched around his fork. He had heard it all before, the same words, the same doubts. And every time, it felt like a small part of him was being crushed. He didn't want to disappoint his dad, but he couldn't ignore the pull of his passion. "I'll do my homework," Ethan said quietly, but he could feel the heat rising in his chest. He didn't want to argue. Not this time. He just wanted his dad to understand, to see that he wasn't wasting his time. But Mark's expression didn't change. "I just want you to have a future, son. A real one. Not just this hobby." Ethan stood up abruptly and left the table. He didn't feel like eating anymore. Instead, he went to his room and shut the door behind him, the weight of his father's words lingering in the air like smoke. It wasn't the first time his dad had expressed doubt about his ambitions, but it felt heavier tonight. The dream of making a difference in the world, of showing his dad that he could do something extraordinary, suddenly seemed further away. The next day, as Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen, he tried to push the negativity aside. He had a plan, a vision. He knew what he was doing wasn't just a hobby. This was the future. He just needed to prove it. But even though his mom believed in him, and his passion was stronger than ever, Ethan knew he couldn't do it alone. The doubts, the tension at home, the constant questioning from his dad, it all weighed on him. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Ethan's mom, Lisa, came to his room later that night. She knocked softly before entering. "Ethan, honey," she began gently, sitting down beside him on the bed. "I know things with your dad are tough right now, but I want you to know that I'm here. You don't have to prove anything to him, or to anyone. Just keep doing what you love. You're so smart and I believe in you, always." Ethan gave her a small smile, grateful for her unwavering support. "I just wish Dad could understand. I don't want to disappoint him." Lisa's voice softened. "You're not disappointing him. It's just that sometimes people need time to understand. Your dad, he just wants the best for you, even if he doesn't always show it the way you want him to." Ethan nodded, but deep down, he felt the weight of his father's disapproval. Still, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to stop. He couldn't. It was in moments like these, when the world seemed to be pulling him in different directions, that Ethan remembered why he did it. Why he worked long nights on his projects. Why he pushed through the doubts and frustrations. He wasn't doing it for anyone else. He was doing it for himself. And someday, he'd show his dad and everyone else just how big the world of technology could be, how it could change the world. And that day was coming soon. Days passed after the conversation with his father. Ethan threw himself into his work, the hum of his computer and the flicker of code on his screen his only companions. The more time he spent developing his AI for self-driving cars, the more his vision grew clearer. He could see it now. This wasn't just about improving technology. It was about creating something that could impact people's lives. This wasn't just a project. It was a mission. But as the days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. The idea had gotten bigger, more ambitious, and with it came more problems. Ethan had always loved challenges, but he'd never faced one like this. His AI system was sophisticated, perhaps too sophisticated for a 10-year-old. It was hard to keep up. His code kept running into bugs, and certain algorithms weren't working as expected. Even worse, his father's disapproval continued to hang over him like a shadow. Every time Ethan looked up from his computer, he could see the disappointment in his dad's eyes. It gnawed at him, making it harder to focus. One evening, as Ethan was deep in thought, his father entered his room without knocking. Mark had been quiet for days, and the tension between them had only grown. "Ethan," Mark started, his voice unusually tense, "I've been hearing things about your project. Some people say you're onto something big." His tone wasn't encouraging, but it wasn't dismissive either. Ethan glanced up from his screen, surprised. "What do you mean?" Mark crossed his arms, a frown etched on his face. "There are rumors. A few people have mentioned your name around the office. I'm hearing things like genius and breakthrough." Ethan felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. Maybe his dad was finally starting to take him seriously. But then came the line that cut through that hope. "But," Mark paused, looking at Ethan with an unreadable expression, "this is more than just a hobby now, right? It's getting serious." Ethan nodded, unsure of where his father was going with this. "Yeah, it's getting bigger than I expected. I think I've really got something here." Mark sighed, and his face softened, but only for a moment. "Listen, Ethan, you need to be careful. People are starting to pay attention, but this isn't a game. You could get hurt in ways you don't understand." Ethan's stomach tightened. "I'm not playing a game, Dad. This is real. This could change everything." Mark didn't respond right away. He stepped closer, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I get it. You think you're changing the world. But what you don't realize is that the world doesn't work the way you think it does. You're a kid, Ethan, and there are people out there who will take advantage of you if you don't watch your back." Ethan's heart sank. "You don't get it. I'm doing this for me, for my future. This is my chance. And you're just trying to stop me." His father's face hardened. "I'm not stopping you. I'm trying to protect you. You're going to learn the hard way if you keep going down this path." With that, Mark turned and left the room, leaving Ethan standing there, frustration boiling in his chest. The words lingered in the air, like a fog Ethan couldn't shake off. "You're just a kid," his father had said. Ethan's mind raced. Why couldn't his dad understand that he was more than just a kid? Why couldn't he see that this was his opportunity? The next day, things seemed to take a turn for the worse. As Ethan worked on refining his AI system, he received an unexpected email. It was from a well-known tech investor, someone who had connections with companies like Tesla and SpaceX. The subject line simply read, "Impressed? Let's talk." Ethan's pulse quickened. This could be it. This could be the breakthrough he needed. He opened the email, heart pounding. The investor was asking for a meeting, a formal presentation of his AI system. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to imagine it, presenting his work to some of the most powerful people in the tech world. He could see it in his mind's eye, sitting in a sleek conference room, explaining his ideas and impressing them with the genius of his work. Maybe this would be his chance to prove that he wasn't just some kid playing with technology. He was the future. But then doubt crept in. What if his dad was right? What if the world wasn't ready for a 10-year-old to take the tech world by storm? What if Ethan wasn't prepared for what might come next? Could he really handle the pressure of being a child prodigy in a grown-up world? He stared at the email for what felt like an eternity. The words seemed to blur, and his mind was filled with conflicting thoughts. He wasn't sure what to do next. But deep down, he knew one thing. He couldn't stop now. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of it all seemed to suffocate him. He was so close to making his dream a reality. Yet, everything, his father's words, his growing doubts, the pressure to succeed, felt like a storm gathering on the horizon. Would he have the strength to ride out the storm, or would he be swept away by it? He had no answers, only questions. And the most pressing one of all, was he ready to face the world on his own? Ethan sat in front of his computer the next morning, his fingers frozen over the keyboard. He had spent the entire night deliberating whether to respond to the investor's email. It wasn't like he had much time to make up his mind. The email was clear. The investor wanted to meet, and the last thing Ethan wanted was to let this opportunity slip through his fingers. But doubt still lingered. Was he really ready for something this big? He had been working alone for months, tweaking his AI, refining the code. But what if it wasn't enough? What if, when he got in front of this investor, he was exposed as just a kid with a dream? Would they take him seriously? Would they even listen? A sudden ping from his phone startled him from his thoughts. It was a message from his mom. "Ethan, just wanted to check in. I know things have been tough with your dad lately. How are you holding up?" He stared at the message for a moment, feeling a lump form in his throat. Ethan loved his mom. She was his biggest supporter, the one person who always believed in him. But even she couldn't shield him from the harsh realities of the world outside. He didn't want to worry her. "I'm okay, Mom. I just have a lot on my mind." He didn't want to tell her about the investor's email or the growing pressure. She already had enough to deal with, especially with the tension at home between him and his dad. But this was different. He knew he couldn't keep it all to himself. After a moment of hesitation, he replied to the investor's email. "Thank you for reaching out. I would love to meet and present my work. I'm available at your earliest convenience." Ethan hit send before he could second-guess himself. The email left his inbox, and suddenly, everything felt more real. His project, his AI, wasn't just an idea anymore. It was about to be shared with someone who could take it further. Ethan wasn't sure whether to be excited or terrified. Maybe both. The next few days felt like a blur. Ethan couldn't focus at school. Every minute that passed seemed to bring him closer to the meeting, but also closer to his father's expectations, which hung over him like an ever-present storm cloud. Finally, the day arrived. Ethan's phone buzzed with a reminder, meeting at 2 p.m. with investor. The hours leading up to the meeting dragged on in agonizing slowness, but at noon, Ethan was already dressed in his best button-up shirt and jeans, his idea of a professional look. He checked his presentation for the umpteenth time, making sure everything was perfect. He was ready, or at least, he hoped he was. As he stepped out of his house, he noticed his dad's car in the driveway. His father was home for lunch, a rare occurrence, given his busy law practice. Ethan hesitated before walking over to the car, unsure of how to handle the conversation. Mark was sitting in the driver's seat, his hands resting on the steering wheel. He looked up as Ethan approached, his expression unreadable. "You're really going to do this?" Mark's voice was low, but there was no mistaking the skepticism in it. Ethan nodded, trying to keep his composure. "I have to. This is my chance, Dad." Mark's eyes softened slightly, but the doubt was still there. "I just want you to be careful. You're not ready for this world. It's not just about ideas and gadgets. There are people out there who will take advantage of you if you don't watch your back." Ethan felt the familiar sting of frustration. "I'm not a kid anymore. I can do this. You don't have to worry." Mark didn't respond right away. He sighed, then looked at Ethan with a mixture of concern and hesitation. "I just don't want you to get hurt, Ethan. The world isn't always kind to dreamers." The words stung more than they should have. Ethan wasn't sure if it was because his dad didn't believe in him, or if it was because deep down, Ethan shared that same fear. But he didn't let it show. "I'll be fine, Dad. I'm doing this. I believe in what I'm doing. I have to try." Mark studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay, just be careful. And remember, no matter what happens, I'm still your dad. I'm here if you need me." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had never wanted to disappoint his father, but this was more important than anything. He wasn't just trying to prove himself to his dad. He was trying to prove it to himself. "Thanks, Dad," Ethan said quietly before turning to leave. The meeting was set in a high-rise building downtown, its glass windows reflecting the skyline in crisp detail. As Ethan walked into the sleek lobby, he couldn't help but feel out of place. This wasn't a school classroom or his garage. It was a professional world he had never imagined stepping into. He was greeted by a woman in a business suit, who led him into a large conference room. At the table sat a middle-aged man, neatly dressed, with a calm but intense demeanor. The investor, Ethan assumed. "Mr. Daniels," the woman said, motioning to the man at the table. "This is Ethan Lawson, the young inventor I told you about." Ethan shook Mr. Daniels's hand, trying to remain calm despite the whirlwind of thoughts running through his head. This was real. This was happening. So, Ethan, Mr. Daniels began, his voice measured, "Tell me about your project." Ethan swallowed, then launched into his pitch. His voice faltered at first, but as he continued talking about the AI system, his confidence grew. He explained how his code could revolutionize self-driving cars by allowing them to think and adapt more intuitively, how it could change the way these vehicles interacted with the world around them. Mr. Daniels listened intently, occasionally nodding as Ethan spoke. When Ethan finished, there was a brief silence. "Well, Ethan," Mr. Daniels said, his tone now more serious, "this is impressive. You've got a remarkable idea here." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Had he really done it? Was this the moment everything would change? But Mr. Daniels wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. "However," he continued, "there's one thing you need to understand about this industry. Ideas like yours are great, but they're just the start. It's not enough to have a brilliant idea. You need resources, you need connections, and most importantly, you need a team of people who can make your idea a reality." Ethan's stomach dropped. Was he telling him it was impossible? "But if you're willing to learn, and if you're willing to trust the right people," Mr. Daniels added with a faint smile, "I think you've got what it takes." Ethan's heart surged. This wasn't just a rejection. It was a challenge. "Are you willing to take that risk, Ethan?" Mr. Daniels asked, his eyes steady. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "I'm ready." Ethan walked out of the high-rise building feeling like he was floating. It wasn't just the adrenaline of the meeting or the excitement of the future that made him feel this way. It was the realization that he had taken a huge step forward. He had done it. He had stood up there in front of the investor, explained his project, and earned his approval. But it wasn't over. As he stepped into the elevator and the doors slid closed, Ethan tried to calm his racing heart. Mr. Daniels had told him he was on the right track, but there was so much more to do. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and risks. He wasn't just building an AI. He was building his future, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. Ethan couldn't wait to get home and tell his mom about the meeting. He knew she would be proud of him, but he also knew that the real work was just beginning. This wasn't a fairy tale. The real world had high expectations, and he would have to prove himself every single day. As he entered the house, his mom was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. She turned when she heard him enter, a smile instantly forming on her face. "How did it go?" she asked eagerly, her eyes shining with curiosity. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then grinned. "It went well, Mom. Really well." Her eyes widened with surprise and pride. "Really? Oh, Ethan, I knew you could do it. Tell me everything." He sat down at the kitchen table, recounting the meeting in as much detail as he could. His mom listened intently, her face a mixture of pride and disbelief that her son, her 10-year-old son, had just pitched an idea to a major investor. "I told him everything," Ethan said, his voice gaining confidence. "And he said my idea was impressive. He also said I need to learn a lot and build a team, but he thinks I've got what it takes." Lisa nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Ethan, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. But remember, it's not going to be easy. You've got a lot of work ahead of you." "I know," Ethan replied, the weight of her words sinking in, "but I'm ready. I have to be." Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up quickly, his heart racing. It was an email from Mr. Daniels. "Ethan, I've spoken with a few colleagues, and we'd like to set up a follow-up meeting next week. We'll discuss some next steps and how we can help you bring this project to life. Please let me know when you're available." Ethan's hands shook slightly as he read the email. It was real. They were ready to move forward. He wants to meet again," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly with excitement. Lisa beamed. "That's amazing, Ethan. This is your chance." Ethan quickly typed a reply, confirming his availability and setting the date. When he hit send, he felt a surge of exhilaration mixed with a sudden wave of pressure. This wasn't just a meeting anymore. This was a turning point in his life. The next time he met with Mr. Daniels, there would be expectations. Serious ones. The next week was a whirlwind. Ethan found himself juggling schoolwork, his project, and the pressure of preparing for the follow-up meeting. There was no room for distractions. His mind constantly raced with ideas, and every minute spent away from his computer felt like lost time. He knew this was his shot. He couldn't afford to mess it up. But as he worked late into the nights, doubts began to creep back in. What if he wasn't ready? What if the AI wasn't good enough? What if the world was simply too big for a 10-year-old to conquer? Ethan's father, Mark, had been more distant lately, though his presence in the house was still constant. Ethan could feel the tension, the unspoken words that hung between them. Mark was still skeptical about Ethan's project, still concerned about the risks, but Ethan could sense the tiniest shift. Perhaps his father was starting to see the potential, even if he didn't understand it fully. One evening, Mark appeared in Ethan's room, surprising him as he sat hunched over his computer. "Hey," Mark said quietly, his tone softer than usual. "How's the project going?" Ethan paused, unsure of how to respond. It's moving forward. I have another meeting with Mr. Daniels next week." Mark nodded, taking a step closer. "That's good. I want you to know, I still don't understand everything you're doing. But if you believe in this, and you're serious about it, I'll back you. You've got my support." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. His father's words were the first real sign of approval he'd received. It wasn't a grand declaration of faith, but it was something. It meant everything. "Thanks, Dad," Ethan said softly, the words carrying more weight than he expected. Mark smiled faintly. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want you to get hurt." "I will," Ethan said, his voice steady. As Mark left the room, Ethan sat back in his chair, his mind racing with a new sense of determination. It wasn't just about the AI anymore. It was about proving that he could do this, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in him. And maybe, just maybe, even for his dad. The day of the follow-up meeting arrived, and Ethan was ready. He spent hours refining his presentation, making sure every detail was perfect. He knew that Mr. Daniels would expect a more polished version of his ideas, and he wasn't about to disappoint. This was his moment. When he arrived at the office, the same woman from the first meeting led him into the conference room, where Mr. Daniels was already waiting. The room was just as sleek as before, but now, the stakes felt much higher. "Ethan," Mr. Daniels greeted him with a smile. "I'm glad you could make it. I've had a chance to review your materials, and I think we're on the right track. Are you ready to dive deeper?" Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes. I've made some updates to the AI. I think it's even more efficient now." Mr. Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Let's see it then." Ethan launched into his presentation, explaining how he had refined the code, added new features, and improved the AI's ability to adapt to real-world scenarios. Mr. Daniels listened intently, nodding occasionally, but his expression remained neutral. When Ethan finished, Mr. Daniels leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "Impressive, Ethan. I think we can work with this. But there's still a lot to do. We'll need to bring in some experts to help you develop this further." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Experts. This was what he had dreamed of, a team of professionals who could help bring his vision to life. "I'm ready," Ethan said, his voice steady, though his mind was spinning with excitement. "Let's do it." Mr. Daniels smiled. "All right, let's make this happen then." The days after the follow-up meeting were a blur. Ethan had barely been able to sleep, consumed by the excitement of his new reality. He had done it. He had made it past the first hurdle, and now, Mr. Daniels was serious about helping him build his AI into something bigger. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was happening. The following week, Ethan received a call from Mr. Daniels. "Ethan," Mr. Daniels began, his voice sounding more urgent than before, "we've assembled a team. A group of engineers, software developers, and business experts. They're all on board to help you. We want to move fast, and we need someone with your vision to guide the project. Are you ready?" Ethan's heart pounded as he sat up straighter in his chair. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, though his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. "A team. Experts. This is real. We'll meet tomorrow at the office to introduce you to the group," Mr. Daniels continued. "They're all eager to meet you, and they're excited about what you've created so far." Ethan hung up the phone, his hands trembling slightly. This was the next step. He had worked alone for so long, but now he was about to enter a new world. One where he wasn't just the young inventor but part of a larger, powerful team. The next day, Ethan stood in the sleek lobby of the office building, his stomach fluttering with nervous energy. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing. This wasn't just about his AI anymore. It was about making connections, learning from the best, and turning his vision into something real. He was led into a conference room where 6 people were already seated at the table, each of them looking up as he entered. Mr. Daniels sat at the head of the table, and there was an empty chair waiting for Ethan. "Ethan, come on in," Mr. Daniels said with a welcoming smile. "These are the people who will be working with you. Let me introduce you." The first person to speak was a woman in her early 30s, with short black hair and glasses. She extended her hand and smiled warmly. "I'm Sarah. I'm a software engineer. I've been working with AI for over a decade, and I'm excited to see what you've been building." Ethan shook her hand, feeling a wave of awe. She had been working on AI for 10 years. 10 years? And she was here, excited about his project. This was real. Next, a tall man in his 40s stood up and introduced himself. "I'm Tom, a systems architect. I've been working with self-driving cars for years. I think we can integrate your AI into some exciting applications." Ethan nodded, trying to keep his composure. Self-driving cars. He had always dreamed of his AI being used in that kind of technology, but hearing someone who had been working in the field for years say it made everything feel possible. Then there was a younger woman named Rachel, a business strategist. "I'm here to help you take this project to the next level," she said, her voice confident. "We'll need a solid business plan, investor pitches, and a roadmap for the future." Ethan nodded again, his mind racing. He had thought about the business side of things, but he hadn't realized just how much work it would take to get investors on board. With Rachel's help, he felt confident they could make it happen. Each of the other members of the team introduced themselves. There was Alex, a machine learning expert, and Grace, an experienced data scientist. The team seemed like a dream come true, each person bringing expertise in areas where Ethan was still learning. Finally, Mr. Daniels stood up. "So, Ethan, this is your team. These people are here to help you, and they believe in what you're doing. They're not here to tell you what's possible. They're here to help you make the impossible happen. But this is your vision. We're here to execute it." Ethan stood there, stunned for a moment. My vision. For so long, he had been on his own. Now, he had a group of talented people who would help bring his dream to life. For the first time in weeks, he felt a wave of hope wash over him. This wasn't just his project anymore. It was bigger, and he wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, Ethan immersed himself in the work. It was overwhelming at first. There were so many things to consider. He was no longer writing code alone in his room. Now, he was in meetings with experts, discussing every aspect of the AI, from its algorithms to its scalability. The team challenged him, asked tough questions, and pushed him to think even bigger. And he loved it. Sarah helped Ethan fine-tune the AI's neural network, ensuring that it could learn from its environment with increasing accuracy. Tom worked on integrating the system with various self-driving car platforms, ensuring that the AI could adapt to different hardware and systems. Rachel began drafting a business plan that would attract investors, while Alex and Grace dove deep into data, testing the AI's ability to predict real-world scenarios. But despite the support, there were moments when Ethan felt the pressure building. He was only 10 years old, and even with all these experts around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't truly one of them. Every time they spoke in technical terms, every time they referenced years of experience, Ethan couldn't help but feel a little out of place. One afternoon, as he sat in front of his computer, working on some code, Rachel stopped by his desk. "Hey, Ethan," she said softly, her voice gentle. "How's everything going?" Ethan shrugged, trying to hide his frustration. "It's fine, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm out of my depth. These people have been working on this stuff for years, and I'm just a kid." Rachel smiled. "You're not just a kid, Ethan. You've got something that none of us have, vision. You see things others don't. And that's what makes you special. Don't sell yourself short." Ethan looked up at her, her words sinking in. Vision. It was true. He had seen the potential in the AI when no one else did. He had believed in it when it was just lines of code on his screen. He wasn't out of his depth. He was exactly where he was meant to be. The team continued to work tirelessly, day after day, refining the AI. Each member brought something vital to the project, and together, they began to shape the future of self-driving technology. But Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. They had made incredible progress, but there was still so much left to do. He glanced around at the team, feeling a sense of pride that he couldn't quite put into words. They weren't just helping him build his project, they were helping him build his future. And in that moment, Ethan realized that he wasn't just a kid who had built an AI. He was a leader, the one guiding the team towards something bigger than all of them. And that was only the beginning. The days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself deeply immersed in the project. The team had become more than just a group of experts. They were becoming a second family to him. Each day brought new challenges, and with each challenge, he learned more than he ever expected. But as the AI began to take shape, one question lingered in the back of Ethan's mind. Would it work? The first major test was fast approaching, and the pressure was mounting. The team had spent months refining the algorithms, training the machine learning models, and testing the AI in a variety of simulated environments. Now, it was time to put it to the test in the real world. The AI had to drive a car autonomously through a controlled test track, navigating obstacles and making split-second decisions. It was the ultimate proving ground. If the AI passed this test, they would have a solid foundation for the next phase. If it failed, they'd have to go back to the drawing board. Ethan stood in front of the test vehicle, a sleek, electric car that had been fitted with sensors, cameras, and the necessary hardware to run the AI. His heart raced in anticipation. His team stood around him, some adjusting the equipment, others making last-minute tweaks to the code. "You ready for this?" Tom asked, his voice calm but tinged with excitement. He was the systems architect and had been overseeing the integration of the AI with the car. Ethan nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. "I think so. I've double-checked everything. But there's only one way to find out if it works." Rachel, standing next to him, gave him a reassuring smile. "You've put in the work, Ethan. This is your moment." With a deep breath, Ethan climbed into the driver's seat of the car. It felt surreal. The car was his creation, and now he was about to see it in action. His fingers hovered over the controls, ready to give the AI the command to begin. "Are we good to go?" Ethan asked, looking around at the team. "Good to go," Sarah said, her voice steady. "The AI is ready. Just give it the signal." Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind focused. The car in front of him represented more than just an experiment. It was the culmination of his work and the potential to change the world. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now it was finally here. He pushed the button that activated the AI, and the car's engine hummed to life. The dashboard lit up, and Ethan could see the AI's interface, displaying real-time data and tracking the surrounding environment through the car's cameras. The vehicle was connected to a sophisticated neural network, analyzing every obstacle, every turn, and every movement. The car began to move, slowly at first, as it started its journey around the test track. Ethan held his breath, watching intently as the AI navigated the winding road, making sharp turns and adjusting speed. The sensors detected cones set up along the track as obstacles, and the AI swerved to avoid them without hesitation. It was perfect, too perfect. As the car continued to drive, Ethan's pulse quickened. It was moving smoothly, but there was always that fear in the back of his mind. What if it fails? What if this isn't enough? Then, without warning, the car encountered a more complex obstacle, a tight curve with a sudden drop in elevation. The AI hesitated for a split second before recalculating its approach. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, his fingers tightening on the seat. But then, the AI made a quick adjustment and smoothly navigated the turn. A cheer erupted from the team. Sarah was the first to clap, and the rest of the team followed suit, their faces lighting up with excitement. "I can't believe it," Rachel said, her voice filled with disbelief. "It worked." Ethan sat there, stunned. The AI had passed its first real-world test with flying colors. It was moving with a level of precision he hadn't dared to hope for. The car completed the full circuit without any issues, and as it crossed the finish line, Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. It had worked. The AI had done exactly what he had designed it to do. But as the team gathered around him, congratulating him on the success, a thought gnawed at the back of his mind. What comes next? He couldn't let himself rest on his laurels. The test had been a success, but there were still so many hurdles ahead. This was just one step on a much larger journey. The world had seen many AI systems before, but none of them had his vision behind them. None of them had the potential to change the way people thought about autonomous technology the way his did. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his room, reflecting on everything that had happened. The excitement of the test, the cheers from the team, and the realization that his AI had passed its first real test all seemed like a dream. But in the quiet of his room, as he looked at the glowing screen of his computer, he knew that this was only the beginning. He had proven the concept. Now it was time to scale up, to make the AI even smarter, more adaptive, and ready for real-world challenges. He knew that the road ahead would be filled with obstacles, just as the test had shown, but this time, he wouldn't face them alone. He had a team, and together, they would tackle whatever came their way. There was a knock on his door, and his mom entered, smiling softly. "How did it go?" she asked. Ethan looked up from his screen, a smile spreading across his face. "It went great, Mom. The AI passed the test. It worked." Lisa's face lit up with pride. "I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you, Ethan." Ethan looked back at the glowing screen, his thoughts already racing to the future. "Thanks, Mom, but this is just the start. We've got a lot more to do." She nodded, her expression filled with understanding. "I know, and I believe in you." As Ethan looked at the AI interface on his computer, a sense of purpose washed over him. He wasn't just building technology, he was shaping the future. And nothing, not even the toughest challenges, could stop him now. The success of the test was more than just a victory for Ethan. It was the first real step toward bringing his vision to life on a global scale. But as the weeks went by, and the team continued to improve the AI, a new set of challenges arose. The AI had passed the test track with ease, but it wasn't enough to stop there. Ethan knew that to truly change the world, his AI needed to perform in a variety of unpredictable real-world environments. The team met daily to discuss the next steps. They had completed the initial testing, but now it was time to prepare for the real challenge, testing the AI in urban environments. Ethan's mind was already spinning with the possibilities. The future of autonomous driving wasn't just about navigating open roads and avoiding cones on a track. It was about understanding people, interpreting human behavior, and reacting to complex, ever-changing situations. "We need to test the AI in an urban setting," Sarah said, pulling up a map of a busy city on her laptop. "I'm talking about real streets, with real traffic, pedestrians, and unpredictable conditions. It's going to be a challenge, but it's the next step." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. This was it, the big test. If the AI could succeed here, it would prove that his creation wasn't just a fluke. It would show the world that autonomous vehicles could be safe, efficient, and reliable. "We've already proven the concept on a controlled track," Tom added. "But now we need to simulate real-world conditions. Pedestrians, cyclists, unpredictable drivers, even construction zones. The AI has to be able to respond to all of them in real time." As the discussion continued, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of excitement mixed with anxiety. This next phase wasn't going to be easy. There were so many variables to account for. But he also knew that they had a team of experts who believed in his vision. They were ready to take the next step. A week later, the team was ready to begin the real-world tests. The city they chose for the experiment was a bustling metropolis, full of busy streets and unpredictable traffic patterns. It was the perfect place to push the AI to its limits. Ethan stood by the side of the road, watching the test car as it was prepped for the test. His hands were clammy, and his stomach was tied in knots. This was different from the controlled environment they'd been working with. The real world wasn't so predictable, but he had no choice. This was the moment of truth. "Ready?" Tom asked, checking the car's sensors one last time. Ethan took a deep breath. "Let's do it." The team piled into their vehicles, and the test began. The AI-powered car slowly pulled onto the road, its sensors scanning the environment, analyzing every car, pedestrian, and cyclists around it. Ethan's heart raced as the car navigated through traffic, smoothly adjusting its speed and lanes as needed. The car didn't hesitate, didn't make any sudden movements. It was calm, calculated, just like it was designed to be. As the car continued its journey, the team monitored its progress from a nearby van. Sarah watched the real-time data, noting how the AI responded to changes in traffic patterns and how it reacted to pedestrians crossing the street. "It's doing well," Sarah said, her eyes glued to the screen. "It's making decisions based on real-time data, adjusting speed and route with no issues. We're not seeing any hesitations or mistakes." Ethan watched through the van's window, his nerves slowly beginning to ease. The car was performing flawlessly. It wasn't just avoiding obstacles, it was anticipating them. Pedestrians were crossing at busy intersections, and the AI adjusted its speed to give them space. It was reacting to traffic lights, adjusting for sudden stops, and weaving through tight spaces with ease. "This is incredible," Rachel said, leaning forward in her seat. "It's actually working. It's navigating the city as well as we'd hoped." But as the car turned down a narrow alley, a delivery truck suddenly pulled out in front of it, blocking the road. The AI didn't hesitate. It immediately calculated the best course of action, adjusting its speed and moving around the truck. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had seen the AI respond to this kind of situation in simulations, but seeing it happen in real life was different. "This is it," Ethan whispered to himself, a wave of pride washing over him. The AI was performing exactly as he had envisioned it. The rest of the test went smoothly. The AI navigated through the city with precision, reacting to traffic lights, pedestrians, and other vehicles in real time. It wasn't perfect. There were a few moments when the AI had to slow down or make minor adjustments, but overall, it was performing beyond Ethan's expectations. By the time they finished the test, the entire team was buzzing with excitement. They had just taken a massive step forward. "We did it," Tom said, a broad smile on his face. "We've got a car that can drive itself in a real-world urban environment. This is huge." Ethan couldn't help but smile back. This is just the beginning. As they drove back to the lab to analyze the results, Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. They had proven that the AI could handle real-world driving conditions. But now came the hard part: scaling it, refining it, and making it reliable enough for widespread use. It was one thing to test it in a city like this, but what about different regions, different countries, with different traffic laws and behaviors? Ethan knew that the journey ahead would be filled with more tests, more iterations, and more challenges. But he was ready. He had a team that believed in him, and together, they would push the boundaries of what autonomous vehicles could do. As the van pulled into the lab, Ethan felt a surge of determination. They had taken a giant leap forward, but there was still so much to do. The world was watching, and he couldn't afford to let this opportunity slip away. "All right, team," Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. "Let's get to work." The excitement from the successful urban test still buzzed in Ethan's mind as he walked into the lab the next day. It felt like the future was finally within his grasp, but the reality of the work ahead was already setting in. The AI had passed its most significant test yet, but now came the next challenge: how to scale the project and bring it to the world. That morning, Sarah walked into the lab with a broad grin on her face. "Ethan, you're not going to believe this," she said, waving a piece of paper in front of him. Ethan looked up from his desk, his curiosity piqued. "What's up?" "It's the investor. The one I told you about, the one with deep pockets who's been following our progress," Sarah said, her voice shaking with excitement. "They want to meet with you. They want to invest. Like, seriously invest." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was it. His AI had caught the attention of someone who could help turn it into a global phenomenon. He had worked so hard, putting his passion and ideas into the project, and now, the chance to make it all a reality was finally within reach. "Are you sure?" Ethan asked, trying to mask his excitement. "I mean, this is real, right? They're actually interested in us?" Sarah nodded, still grinning. "Yeah, they're very interested. We have a meeting set up for tomorrow. I'll send you the details." Ethan swallowed hard. His mind raced. This meeting could change everything. Investors meant funding, which meant more resources, more technology, and more ways to refine and scale his AI. But he also knew it was a huge responsibility. Accepting investment meant more eyes on the project, more pressure, and the possibility of losing control over certain aspects of his vision. It was a leap into the unknown. But then he thought about how much more he could do with the right resources. This could change the world. The following day, Ethan and the team arrived at a sleek, modern building in the heart of the city. Inside, the meeting room was filled with glossy wood panels, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a sense of wealth that made Ethan feel small. But as he looked around at his team, he realized that this was their moment. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them. They were led into a conference room, where a man in his early 50s was sitting at the head of the table. He had a sharp suit, sharp features, and a confidence that made Ethan feel both nervous and inspired at the same time. "Mr. Matthews," Sarah said, offering a firm handshake. "This is Ethan." The man, Matthews, looked up at Ethan and extended his hand with a smile. "Ethan, it's a pleasure. I've been hearing a lot about you." Ethan shook his hand, doing his best to keep his cool. "Thank you, Mr. Matthews. It's an honor to meet you." Matthews gestured for them all to sit. Once everyone was settled, he spoke again. "I've been following your project for a while now. Your AI has incredible potential, and I believe it could revolutionize the autonomous vehicle industry. I've seen dozens of startups, but what you're doing is different. You're not just building another self-driving car system. You're building something that understands the world, that adapts, that predicts." Ethan could feel the weight of Matthew's words settling in his chest. They were here. This was real. The pressure was high, but he didn't back down. He had worked too hard to let nerves take over now. "I appreciate your interest, Mr. Matthews," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I've always believed that AI could do more than just follow instructions. It could learn from its environment. It could think for itself. And that's what we're building here." Matthews nodded thoughtfully. "Exactly. But here's the thing. If I'm going to invest, I need to know one thing. Are you ready for the challenges that come with scaling this project? We're talking global deployment, government regulations, public perception, and of course, competition. This isn't just about building a better AI. It's about getting it into the hands of millions of people and making sure it's safe and reliable." The word stung a little. Ethan had been so focused on the technology that he hadn't considered everything else that would come with it. He hadn't thought about the bureaucracy, the legal hurdles, or the way the world might react to his creation. But he couldn't back down now. "I'm ready," Ethan said, his voice firm. "The world needs a change, and I'm not afraid of the challenges. We've got a team that's fully committed, and we've got a vision that can take us there." Matthews seemed to study him for a moment, and then he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "I like your confidence. It's important, but I need to see the numbers. I need to know that this is something we can scale quickly, and more importantly, that it's something people will trust. We've got to make sure your AI can handle real-world unpredictability in a way that makes people feel safe using it." Ethan nodded. "We're already doing real-world testing. The AI's already been tested in an urban environment, handling traffic, pedestrians, and unexpected situations. But we need more resources to refine it and ensure its safety on a global scale." Rachel, who had been quiet during most of the conversation, spoke up. "We've also been working on a strategy to ensure that the AI adapts to different regions and traffic laws. We'll need to implement ongoing training and ensure that it can adjust to different environments, both geographically and culturally." Matthews raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you're thinking ahead." "Good. But what about competition? There are a lot of big players in the game, Ethan. What sets your AI apart?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Our AI isn't just reactive, it's proactive. It doesn't just follow a set of pre-programmed rules. It learns from experience, adapts, and predicts behavior before it happens. That gives us a huge edge in making autonomous vehicles safer and smarter." Matthews leaned forward, clearly intrigued. "I'm impressed. You've got the right mindset, and you've got the tech. But now you need the resources. I'm ready to discuss what that investment could look like, but I need to see one thing first." Ethan leaned in, his pulse quickening. "What's that?" Matthews smiled, his eyes glinting. "Show me what happens when this AI is pushed to the limit. Show me how it handles a real crisis situation." Ethan didn't have to think twice. He knew exactly what Matthews was asking for. "We're ready for that test. We'll show you," Ethan said, his voice steady, full of conviction. The meeting continued for hours as they discussed terms, plans, and visions for the future. By the end of the day, Ethan felt the weight of the responsibility settle in, but also a sense of excitement. Matthews was ready to invest, but the real test was yet to come. As Ethan walked out of the building that evening, his mind raced. The next test would have to be the most daring one yet. But if they could pull it off, everything would change. He had the team, he had the vision, and now, with the investment, he had the resources. The world was watching, and it was time to show them just how far this AI could go. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The buzz of the investor meeting had barely faded before Ethan found himself deep in preparation for the next big challenge, the crisis test. Matthews had made it clear that he wanted to see how the AI responded under real pressure, in a situation where every second counted. For Ethan and the team, this was the ultimate test of their creation. If they could prove that the AI could handle an unpredictable, high-stakes situation, they would be able to gain the trust of investors, regulators, and the public. The plan was straightforward. They would simulate a high-risk scenario where the AI would be forced to make a decision in a split second. The idea was to recreate the kind of situation that autonomous vehicles might face in the real world. An emergency situation with limited time to react, where human judgment alone could be the difference between life and death. "Do you think it's ready?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying an edge of concern as she sat down at the team table. Ethan rubbed his temples, staring at the screen in front of him. The test scenario they had designed was a collision course. The AI would be driving through a densely populated urban street when, out of nowhere, a car would swerve into its path at high speed. There would be a choice: avoid the collision by swerving and risk hitting pedestrians, or brake hard and risk being rear-ended by the cars behind. "We're about as ready as we can be," Ethan replied, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "The AI is as prepared as we can make it, but there's always uncertainty. This is a real test of decision-making under pressure." The stakes felt higher than ever. Matthews was coming to observe this test in person, and Ethan knew that everything would be riding on the AI's performance. If it failed to react appropriately, the investment deal could collapse, and the dream of revolutionizing the autonomous driving industry could slip away. The day of the test arrived, and Ethan stood by the side of the track, watching as the team set up. The controlled environment they were testing in was designed to mimic the chaos of a city street: cars, pedestrians, cyclists, and all the obstacles an AI would have to navigate in a real-world situation. There was a tension in the air, a sense that this test could make or break everything. Matthews was already there, pacing nearby, clearly eager to see how the AI would handle the crisis scenario. Ethan could tell that the investor was a man who expected results, not just promises. "Remember, we're not just proving the AI can avoid a crash," Matthews said, his voice sharp. "We're proving it can make decisions that prioritize human life. That's the ultimate test." Ethan nodded, his mind already focused on the upcoming trial. "We've designed the system to make split-second ethical decisions. It'll react based on the calculated risk, balancing lives and minimizing harm." Tom, who had been working tirelessly on the vehicle's integration, walked over to Ethan with a clipboard in hand. "Everything's in place. The car's ready to go. We're just waiting for the green light." Ethan took one last look at the car, a sleek and powerful machine, loaded with cameras and sensors, and then turned his gaze toward the track. The simulation would take place in a section of road that included both a sharp bend and a sudden obstacle, a car that would unexpectedly swerve into the AI's lane. The countdown began, and Ethan's pulse quickened. The AI had done well in training scenarios, but nothing was quite like this. The test began. The car accelerated smoothly down the track, its sensors constantly updating the car's surroundings, scanning for potential hazards. Ethan's fingers gripped the edge of the monitor as he observed in real time. The AI was already scanning the environment ahead, analyzing the flow of traffic, the speed of the cars around it, the position of pedestrians. Then, in the blink of an eye, the car ahead of the AI swerved violently into its lane. a silver sedan veering directly into the vehicle's path. The AI had no time to waste. It had to make a decision, and fast. A loud beep sounded as the AI calculated its options. To the left of the car was a group of pedestrians, walking along a designated crosswalk. To the right, a line of stationary vehicles, no escape there. The AI's processor hummed, running hundreds of algorithms at once, calculating every potential outcome. Seconds passed. It felt like an eternity. Ethan watched in suspense as the AI's decision was made. Without hesitation, the car swerved to the right, narrowly avoiding the oncoming vehicle, and, with a quick response, slowed down, allowing the rear-end collision to be avoided. The silver sedan continued its reckless path into the barricade ahead, coming to a halt just past where the AI had been seconds earlier. A collective sigh of relief passed through the team. The AI had made the right call. It prioritized avoiding the pedestrians, slowed down to mitigate the impact of the other vehicle, and prevented a catastrophic collision. But the real test wasn't over. Ethan's eyes immediately moved to Matthews, who stood in silence, watching the footage from the test. The decision had been a success, but there was still the matter of human judgment. Would Matthews be impressed? Or would he see it as too risky? Thoughts? Ethan asked, his voice tight as he approached the investor. Matthews didn't speak immediately. He studied the screen, replaying the incident from several angles. His expression was unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like everything was hanging in the balance. Finally, Matthews turned to him and nodded slowly. It did exactly what we expected. The AI didn't hesitate, but it didn't just act on impulse either. It calculated risk and reacted. That's the kind of decision-making we need. It showed understanding of the environment, of human lives. I'm impressed, Ethan. Ethan's heart soared. He had been holding his breath, waiting for the verdict, and now that the moment had passed, a weight lifted from his shoulders. Matthews was impressed, not just with the technology, but with the ethical reasoning behind it. The AI had passed the test. Matthews clapped Ethan on the back. Well done. You've got something special here. I'm ready to move forward with the investment. Let's talk details. As the meeting wrapped up, Ethan felt a surge of accomplishment. The test had gone off without a hitch, and Matthews had seen the value in what they were building. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Ethan could see the path ahead clearly. He had the investment, he had the support, and he had a team that believed in him. We did it, Rachel said, her voice full of relief as she joined him. The hardest part is over. Ethan looked out over the test track, the reality of their success sinking in. This is just the beginning. We've proven we can handle a crisis. But now, it's time to change the world. With a renewed sense of purpose, Ethan turned to face the future. The days following the successful crisis test felt like a blur. Ethan and his team were riding a wave of momentum, the confidence from their achievements pushing them forward. The world was beginning to notice. What had once been a dream shared among a small group of passionate engineers was quickly becoming a reality that could reshape the way people thought about transportation. But with this newfound attention came new pressures. The investment from Matthews was a game-changer. It meant more resources, more opportunities, but also more scrutiny. The responsibility was heavier than ever before, and Ethan knew the next steps had to be carefully calculated. Ethan, Sarah called from the other side of the lab, breaking his concentration. We've got a major media outlet interested in doing an interview. They want to know how we're planning to scale this technology and what the future of autonomous vehicles looks like. Ethan sighed, rubbing his eyes. I don't know if I'm ready for the media circus. We're just getting started. The real work is still ahead of us. I get that, Sarah said, walking over to him with a sympathetic smile. But this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. If we can control the narrative now, we'll have a head start when it comes to public perception. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the importance of getting ahead of the media. Autonomous vehicles had been a topic of skepticism and controversy for years. Safety concerns, potential job losses, and the fear of new technology had clouded the public's perception. They needed to show the world that they weren't just building a car. They were building a safer, smarter future. All right, Ethan said, sitting up straighter. Let's do it. Let's show them what we've got. The interview was scheduled for the following week, and the team worked tirelessly to prepare. They rehearsed answers, honed their talking points, and made sure every detail was accounted for. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about their vision for the future of transportation. The day of the interview arrived, and the team gathered at the lab, waiting for the media crew to set up. Ethan's nerves were a little more settled now, but he couldn't help feeling a sense of anxiety. This was a big moment. One slip-up could turn everything they'd worked for into a PR nightmare. The crew arrived with their cameras and equipment, setting up in the main lab space. Sarah and Tom were already in position, reviewing the script. Matthews had made it clear that he wanted them to be strategic in how they presented themselves to the public, calm, composed, and confident. Finally, the interview began. A well-dressed host, Michelle Collins, stood in front of the cameras, flashing a warm smile. "Ethan, thank you so much for joining us today. Your AI-powered vehicles have taken the world by storm. What do you think has been the key to your success so far?" Ethan took a deep breath before responding. "Thank you, Michelle. It's been an incredible journey. I think the key has been the vision behind the technology. We didn't just want to build a car that could drive itself. We wanted to build something that understands the world around it, that adapts, learns, and makes decisions in real time. That's what sets us apart." Michelle nodded, clearly impressed by his answer. "That's fascinating. And what about safety? Autonomous vehicles have been met with a lot of skepticism over the years. How do you address the concerns of people who worry about the safety of these cars on the road?" Ethan leaned forward slightly, his tone sincere. "Safety is at the heart of everything we do. We've designed our system to be as responsive and adaptive as possible. It doesn't just follow a set of predetermined rules, it anticipates what could happen next. We've conducted rigorous testing, including real-world scenarios, where our AI has demonstrated that it can react in ways that prioritize human safety. But we also understand that trust takes time, and we're committed to proving ourselves every step of the way." Sarah, who had been quietly observing from the sidelines, exchanged a glance with Tom. They were all on the same page. This was the moment to show the world that they weren't just building the future. They were making it safer, more intelligent, and more reliable. Michelle continued, "It sounds like you've put a lot of thought into these challenges. But what about the ethical decisions? In a crisis, your AI needs to make decisions quickly, and sometimes those decisions could involve human lives. How do you program the AI to make those choices?" Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then he found his footing. "That's a great question, Michelle. One of the key elements we focus on is ethical decision-making. The AI doesn't simply react. It processes a situation, evaluates the potential outcomes, and chooses the best course of action based on minimizing harm. It's about making decisions that align with human values, even in the most high-pressure moments. This is something we take very seriously, and it's something we'll continue to refine as we scale." Michelle seemed impressed, nodding as she processed his words. "It's clear that you've thought about these challenges carefully. What's next for you and your team?" Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "Next, we scale. We take this technology to more cities, more environments. We continue testing and refining, making sure that it's not just safe but also accessible. We believe that the future of transportation can be safer, smarter, and more sustainable. We're not just building cars. We're building a future where people can travel without fear, without waste, and without pollution. And that's what we're working toward every day." As the interview wrapped up, Ethan felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had spoken from the heart, and the team had worked together to craft a vision that was both ambitious and grounded in reality. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about the impact they could have on the world. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The interview aired across multiple networks, and the response was overwhelming. Social media buzzed with questions, support, and skepticism, but overall, the feedback was positive. People were intrigued, curious, and hopeful. They wanted to know more about how this AI could change their lives. Matthews called Ethan soon after the interview aired. "Well, I have to say, you've made quite an impression. The media loved your message, and investors are taking notice. We're looking at expanding the next phase much faster than expected." Ethan couldn't help but grin. "That's great news, Mr. Matthews. We're ready to push forward." "Just remember," Matthews said, his tone serious but encouraging, "the real work starts now. Scaling the technology, getting through regulatory hurdles, making sure everything's safe and reliable. It's all coming up, but I believe in your vision. Let's get to work. Ethan stood at the window of the lab, looking out over the city. The future was closer than ever, but so were the challenges. He was ready for them. The road ahead would be tough, but with the right team, the right vision, and the right technology, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The early morning sun bathed the city in a golden hue as Ethan stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the sprawling metropolis below. It felt like a metaphor for everything that was happening. A new dawn on a vast horizon, full of possibilities. But the weight of what lay ahead was impossible to ignore. Scaling a revolutionary technology was no small feat. They had proven they could handle a crisis scenario, and they had earned the trust of investors. But now, it was time to prove that they could scale the technology to work in real-world conditions across entire cities. The phone in his pocket buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Ethan, Matthews wants us to meet him today. He says it's time for the next step. Make sure we're prepared for the discussion." Ethan's heart raced. They'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, but the stakes had just gone up. Matthews was pushing them to move faster, and he wasn't known for his patience. After a quick reply to Rachel, he turned and headed back inside the building. The team was waiting, huddled around a conference table in the war room, eyes glued to their monitors. They had been working tirelessly to perfect the AI's integration into urban environments, designing systems that would allow the vehicles to respond seamlessly to traffic patterns, pedestrians, and unexpected roadblocks. "All right, team," Ethan said as he walked into the room. "It's time. Matthews wants to discuss scaling. We need to be ready for this meeting. This is where the rubber meets the road." Rachel, always sharp and prepared, was the first to respond. "We've already mapped out the rollout plan for the next phase. We have target cities lined up for testing. Our goal is to prove that the technology works in real-world conditions, not just in a controlled environment." Tom, the technical genius, added, "We've also been working on improving the vehicle sensor systems. The AI needs to be more adaptive, able to handle a wider range of situations. I'm confident that we'll be able to integrate those updates into the next prototype." Ethan nodded, grateful for the team's dedication and expertise. "Great. Let's be clear in the meeting. We need to show Matthews not just that we can scale, but that we can do it responsibly. We can't afford to take shortcuts, and we need to keep safety at the forefront of everything." The door to the conference room opened, and Sarah entered, holding a tablet with the latest data on their test runs. "I've reviewed the metrics from our initial pilot cities," she said, offering Ethan the tablet. "The data looks promising, but we need to work out a few more bugs in traffic signal synchronization and emergency response protocols before we move forward." Ethan took the tablet and scanned the data quickly. There were a few minor glitches, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with some adjustments to the system. The AI was performing well under most conditions, but it still had to learn how to deal with edge cases, the unpredictable situations that would arise in an urban jungle filled with human drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. "We'll fix the bugs. We'll make it work," Ethan said confidently. "But we need to be transparent with Matthews. If we're going to scale this quickly, we have to ensure everything is ironclad. No compromises." Later that afternoon, Ethan and the team sat across from Matthews in a high-rise conference room. The city stretched out before them, a bustling hive of activity, much like the journey they were about to embark on. Matthews sat across from them, his posture straight, his fingers steepled as he listened to the team outline their plans. "All right, Ethan," Matthews said, breaking the silence. "I'm impressed with the progress, but the reality is, scaling a product like this is a monumental task. We can't afford to waste time. What's your plan for going from a handful of test vehicles to a full-scale rollout in major cities?" Ethan took a deep breath. The pressure was on, but he had been preparing for this moment. "We've already identified key cities that are open to testing. Each of them has unique traffic patterns, infrastructure, and regulatory challenges, which will allow us to fine-tune the AI in real-world scenarios. We're also in talks with local governments to ensure we comply with all regulations and safety standards." Matthews raised an eyebrow. "And you're confident the AI can handle these cities, especially with the unpredictable nature of human drivers?" Ethan glanced at his team, then back at Matthews. We've tested the system extensively, and while there are always edge cases, we've designed the AI to learn from every interaction. The more data it collects, the smarter it becomes. We've worked through the critical safety protocols, including emergency stop functions, collision avoidance, and ethical decision-making. This isn't just about getting the car to drive itself. It's about ensuring that it can respond responsibly no matter what happens on the road. Matthews looked thoughtful for a moment, tapping his fingers on the table. All right, Ethan, I'm willing to take the risk, but I need more than just confidence. I need a detailed plan. I want to see exactly how you're going to address scalability, both from a technical and operational standpoint. Ethan felt a surge of determination. He knew they could do this, but now was the time to prove it. We've mapped out a timeline for scaling. The next phase will involve ramping up production while continuing our real-world testing. We'll begin with 2 cities, using those as our testing grounds before expanding further. Each city will get a tailored approach, with local regulatory hurdles and infrastructure taken into account. But we won't rush it. We'll make sure the vehicles meet every safety requirement before we expand. Matthews leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. That's what I like to hear. But I want to make sure you're not underestimating the public's perception of this. People are going to have concerns. What's your strategy for dealing with the media, government officials, and the public? Rachel spoke up. We've already begun working on our public relations strategy. We'll be transparent with the public about our progress, especially in terms of safety and regulation. We've set up a dedicated communications team to handle questions and concerns, and we plan to engage with local communities to build trust. The goal is to show people that we're not just launching a new product, we're creating a safer future. Matthews was silent for a moment, before nodding. All right, I'm in. You have the green light. Let's get this moving. As they left the meeting, Ethan felt a mixture of relief and excitement. Matthews had given them the go-ahead, but now, the real challenge began. The AI had passed the tests, the investments were in place, and the team was ready to scale, but the road ahead was uncertain. There would be setbacks. There would be challenges. But for the first time, Ethan could see the potential for a future where AI-driven vehicles could be a reality on every road. Let's make this happen, Ethan said as they exited the building, looking at the team. The world's waiting for us. The excitement and anticipation within the team were palpable as they prepared for the next big milestone, the launch of their first real-world test city. After months of development, testing, and tweaking the AI, they were about to put their technology to the ultimate test, navigating a bustling, unpredictable urban environment filled with human drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't a controlled lab environment anymore. It was the real world, with real risks. Ethan stood at the front of the room, scanning the faces of his team. Rachel, Tom, Sarah, and the others were there, each one ready for the challenge ahead. All right, everyone, Ethan began, his voice steady but charged with the weight of the moment. We've worked incredibly hard to get to this point. This is our first city deployment, and it's going to test everything we've done so far. But I have complete faith in each one of you. We've got this. He paused, letting the gravity of the moment settle in. The first city is going to be our proving ground. We've selected a metropolitan area that has dense traffic, diverse road conditions, and a population that is eager to see innovation. If we can prove that our AI can work here, in this environment, the sky's the limit. But we need to be ready for anything. Tom, who had been tirelessly working on the vehicle's hardware integration, raised his hand. I've just finished going through the final software updates and sensor calibrations. The cars are good to go, but I'll be on site for the first few days to ensure everything runs smoothly. Rachel, always the strategic planner, spoke next. We've also prepared for potential regulatory challenges. We've been in contact with local government officials, and we've made sure that all our vehicles comply with local traffic laws. There will be public skepticism, but we've developed a communication plan to handle that as well. Ethan nodded, grateful for the team's preparation and professionalism. I want everyone to be on high alert for the first few weeks. If anything goes wrong, we address it immediately. Safety is our priority. We can't afford to rush things. The team arrived in the city a few days later. Ethan's pulse quickened as the sleek, autonomous vehicles were unloaded from the transport trucks, ready for their first run in real traffic. The city was alive with the buzz of construction, traffic, and the everyday rhythm of urban life. Ethan stood at the edge of the testing zone, watching the city come to life in front of him. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. He checked his phone one last time. There was a message from Matthews. "Remember, Ethan, success in the first city is crucial. Get this right, and the rest will follow. But don't get complacent. Stay focused." Ethan smiled slightly. Matthews was always pushing them, always challenging them to be better. But Ethan was ready. He had always been a firm believer in the power of perseverance and innovation. This city was just the beginning. The first test began early the next morning. Ethan stood behind a row of computers, watching the data feed from the vehicles in real time. The cars, equipped with a full array of sensors and cameras, were weaving through the city streets, making sharp turns, responding to traffic lights, and even negotiating tight spaces between other vehicles. "Systems are running smoothly," Sarah said, her voice calm but alert as she monitored the data. "The cars are responding to traffic patterns, adjusting speed, and keeping a safe distance from other vehicles. The real test will come once we hit the high traffic areas." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the live feed. The AI was performing as expected, reacting quickly to traffic signals, pedestrian crossings, and the occasional erratic behavior from human drivers. But the city was unpredictable, and Ethan knew there was always the possibility of something unexpected happening. "Let's see how it handles the intersection up ahead," Ethan said, pointing to a major crossroad on the screen. "It's a busy one, and we need to test how well it adjusts when there's congestion." As the vehicle approached the intersection, the AI sensors detected a large number of cars backed up at a red light. The vehicle smoothly slowed down, its algorithms calculating the best route forward without getting too close to the other cars. It came to a complete stop, waiting for the light to change. A car behind it honked impatiently, swerving to the right in an attempt to pass, but the AI held its ground. It wasn't rushing. It wasn't cutting corners. It was waiting for the right moment to proceed safely. "Perfect," Ethan murmured, a wave of relief washing over him. The system was handling the intersection flawlessly. A few days into the trial, the team started to receive feedback from the city's residents. The initial response was overwhelmingly positive. People were intrigued by the sleek, driverless cars gliding through the streets, navigating traffic with ease. Many residents saw the promise of a safer future where accidents caused by human error could be minimized. But not everyone was convinced. A small group of skeptics began to raise concerns, primarily around the safety of the technology and its potential impact on jobs. There were protests outside City Hall, and news outlets began running stories questioning whether autonomous vehicles were ready for widespread adoption. Ethan knew this would happen. He'd seen it before with other technological innovations. But the pressure still weighed heavily on him. They had to prove that the AI could handle every possible scenario, and that included the skepticism of the public. "We need to address these concerns head-on," Rachel said during one of their team meetings. "We need to be transparent about how our AI works, how we've tested it, and what measures we've taken to ensure public safety. If we're going to win over the public, we need to build trust." Tom agreed. "I think it's also important to get some real-time feedback from the people using the cars. We can't just be reactive. We need to be proactive in our communication." Ethan listened to their suggestions, grateful for their input. He knew that they had to balance the excitement of the success with the reality of the challenges they faced. This was only the beginning, and they had to be prepared for anything. One evening, as Ethan walked down the bustling city street, he paused to watch one of their autonomous vehicles stop at a crosswalk to let pedestrians pass. The moment felt like a turning point. They weren't just building technology. They were changing how people interacted with transportation. But just as he was about to walk back to the lab, he heard a screeching sound, a car horn blaring. Ethan spun around. A car had swerved into the lane of one of their autonomous vehicles, causing the AI to slam on the brakes just in time to avoid a collision. The human driver, distracted and erratic, was clearly agitated, shaking his fist as he sped off. "Everything all right?" Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. Ethan exhaled, watching the vehicle continue on its path without incident. "Yeah, just a close call. The AI handled it perfectly." But it's moments like these that remind me how much work we still have to do. We're not just fighting technology, we're fighting human behavior. He turned and walked back to the lab, resolute. The first city test had been a success, but there was still so much more to prove. The road ahead would be long, filled with obstacles and challenges, but Ethan knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face whatever came next. The success in the first city had been a breath of fresh air, but Ethan knew it was only the beginning. With each positive test run, new challenges appeared, and the pressure to scale the operation began to mount. The team had proven that their technology could navigate through a controlled environment, but expanding it to multiple cities, with varying regulations and infrastructure, was another beast entirely. Ethan sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by his core team. Rachel, Tom, Sarah, and the others were there, each with a mix of excitement and exhaustion in their eyes. They had just wrapped up a week of testing and had a lot to process. We've proven the AI works in the real world. The first city is a success, Ethan said, looking around at the group. But now we have to talk about scaling. This means a bigger footprint, more cars, more drivers, more cities, more everything. Rachel raised her hand. We've got a few cities lined up, but we're going to need a strategy for handling the local governments, each with their own set of traffic laws and regulations. Some cities have more progressive stances on autonomous vehicles, others are more hesitant. We'll need a tailored approach. Ethan nodded. The regulatory landscape was one of their biggest hurdles. Every city had different rules, and getting approval for autonomous vehicles required not just technological readiness but political buy-in. They couldn't afford to be complacent. Tom, Ethan turned to the tech guru. We've been able to handle most of the traffic scenarios in the first city, but how scalable is the technology? I need to know if we can adapt to cities with more complex road networks, tighter streets, and different traffic behaviors. Tom ran his hand through his hair, tapping his tablet. We've been working on algorithms that allow the AI to learn city-specific behaviors. That means we won't be starting from scratch in every new city. As we add more vehicles to the fleet, the AI continues to improve, learning from each interaction. But, of course, there are always variables, weather conditions, the kind of traffic, and the behavior of human drivers. These things are always evolving. Sarah, always the voice of reason, spoke up. We've also been working on expanding the fleet. Scaling isn't just about technology, it's about infrastructure too. We'll need to set up distribution hubs, charging stations, maintenance centers, and support teams. The logistics of getting hundreds of cars into these cities and keeping them running smoothly is a challenge. Ethan took a deep breath. The vision was there, but the details were overwhelming. Still, he was confident in his team. They had overcome obstacles before, and they would do it again. We need to take this step by step, he said. First, we'll focus on the next city. Let's use it as a blueprint for our scaling process. We can't afford to rush it. If we do it right, we'll have a solid foundation to expand from. Rachel smiled. I've already got a list of regulatory contacts in the next city. They're expecting us in a week for the initial meetings. We'll bring them up to speed on our progress and work out the details. I think we can win them over. Ethan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. It was a message from Matthews. Ethan, the next city is crucial. You've done well so far, but now we need to move quickly. The competition is catching up. I expect updates from you soon. Ethan sighed. Matthews had always been a driving force in their venture, demanding, relentless, and constantly pushing them to do more. But now, more than ever, Ethan felt the weight of the task. The pressure to succeed had never been greater. The following week, the team flew to the next city, a sprawling urban area known for its heavy traffic and complex street grid. As soon as they touched down, the differences between this city and the first were immediately apparent. The streets were narrow, the intersections chaotic, and the city's infrastructure was outdated, with a hodgepodge of traffic signals and poorly maintained roads. Ethan stood outside the hotel, looking at the busy streets. The cars sped by in every direction, honking at each other, cutting each other off. He had seen this kind of chaos before. Every city had its own rhythm, its own set of challenges. But this was the next big test, and failure was not an option. Welcome to the next frontier, Rachel said as she joined him, glancing at the traffic with a mix of awe and concern. It's a lot more unpredictable. Ethan turned to her with a smile. If we can handle this, we can handle anything. The first meeting with city officials didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. While the first city had been open to innovation, this one was more cautious. The local government officials were skeptical, questioning everything from the safety of the vehicles to the potential impact on jobs. The conversation was tense, and it was clear they would have to jump through several hoops to get approval for testing. Rachel did most of the talking, carefully outlining the benefits of the technology. We're not just here to introduce a new product. We're here to solve problems. Reduce traffic, fewer accidents, and less pollution. Our technology is designed to adapt to any city, regardless of how complex or outdated the infrastructure might be. Despite the pushback, Ethan remained optimistic. They had faced challenges before. This was just one more hurdle to overcome. Later that afternoon, the team gathered at their temporary office space, brainstorming ways to address the concerns raised by city officials. They needed to show that their technology could be adapted to this city's unique needs, especially the infrastructure issues. We're going to need to work with the local traffic authorities, Sarah said, tapping her pen on the table. We need to integrate our system with their outdated traffic signals. That could be a huge hurdle, but if we can make it work here, it'll set a precedent for other cities. Tom nodded. The key will be fine-tuning the AI's learning ability. The system has to adjust quickly to different traffic behaviors, road conditions, and the unique challenges of each city. We'll need to tweak the algorithms. Ethan felt a surge of determination. This was the challenge they had been preparing for. They had the technology. They had the team. All they needed now was the persistence to make it work. We're going to get this done, he said, his voice steady with resolve. We'll prove to them that our technology can work here. And when we do, it will open the door to every other city. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, data analysis, and adjustments to the vehicles and AI system. The team worked tirelessly, modifying the cars to adapt to the city's unique traffic patterns. They made progress, but every step forward seemed to be met with a new challenge: weather conditions, unforeseen roadblocks, and occasional technical glitches. Then came the day of the first live test in the new city. Ethan watched as the autonomous vehicle smoothly navigated through the streets, responding to traffic signals, pedestrians, and cyclists with precision. For the first time, it felt like the AI was truly living up to its potential, not just following programmed instructions, but adapting to the environment around it. But just as he allowed himself to relax, the vehicle entered a tight alleyway, where a delivery truck had illegally parked. The AI quickly assessed the situation, slowed down, and found a way to maneuver around the obstacle without any issue. Ethan watched in awe as the system handled it flawlessly. "This is it," Ethan whispered to himself. "This is what we've been working for." The successful test run in the new city was a turning point for the team, but it also marked the beginning of an even more intense phase. With the technology proving itself capable of handling unpredictable urban environments, it was time to face a new challenge: scaling up operations across the country and, ultimately, the world. Ethan could feel the weight of the task ahead. The pressure was mounting, but so was the excitement. Back in their temporary office, the team gathered around their conference table, laptops open, ready for the next step. "This is the tipping point," Rachel said, her eyes glowing with excitement as she looked over the data. "If we can get this right, we can go national. We're on the verge of something huge. But we can't afford to miss a single detail." Ethan agreed, his mind racing with thoughts of the next phase. He looked at the team, all of them looking back at him with the same combination of determination and concern. "Scaling this thing up means moving faster," Ethan said, his voice firm. "We're already getting attention from major cities across the country. Some of them are excited to implement the technology. Others, not so much. But that's where we come in. We can't just show them the car. We have to show them the future. The future we're building." The weeks following the success in the second city were a whirlwind of media attention, meetings with government officials, and technical evaluations. The story of the company's progress quickly spread across the tech world, generating buzz in Silicon Valley and beyond. Investors started reaching out, offering to back the team's next big push. The attention was both exhilarating and exhausting. But amidst all the excitement, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It wasn't the technology, it was the larger picture. As the team geared up for expansion, they were not only dealing with regulatory challenges but growing competition. New startups were popping up with similar technology, and some were making bold claims about having developed an even more advanced version of the AI. One evening, as Ethan sat at his desk, he received an unexpected email. It was from an anonymous source, containing a single line of text. "They're coming for you." The message sent a chill down his spine. It was cryptic, but Ethan knew what it meant. The competition had caught wind of their success, and they were preparing to launch a full-scale attack. Publicly, politically, and technologically. Over the next few days, the team was hit with a barrage of challenges. A series of articles appeared in major news outlets questioning the safety of autonomous vehicles. Some highlighted minor glitches from earlier tests, while others focused on the potential job losses caused by automation in the transportation industry. It seemed like everywhere they turned, there was new resistance, some fueled by competitors looking to undercut their success. Rachel spent hours on the phone with reporters, trying to maintain the company's image and reassure the public that they were committed to safety and transparency. Meanwhile, Tom and Sarah worked overtime to address the glitches pointed out by critics, tweaking the algorithms and refining the systems to eliminate any inconsistencies. But as the pressure grew, so did the team's resolve. They knew they were on the cusp of something revolutionary, and they refused to let the challenges break them. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of troubleshooting, Ethan stood on the balcony of his apartment, gazing out at the city below. The streets were alive with the movement of cars, people, and lights, a reminder of just how much needed to change. He thought back to the very first days of the project, when he and his team were just a group of dreamers, working late into the night, hoping their idea would take flight. Now, the dream was real, but it had grown into something bigger than any of them could have imagined. And with that came the weight of responsibility. He glanced at his phone and saw a message from Matthews. "I've been hearing about the competition. You can't let them get ahead. Get your act together. Make the right moves, or you'll lose everything." Ethan clenched his jaw. The pressure was becoming unbearable, but he wasn't ready to give up, not when they were this close. The next morning, Ethan called an emergency meeting with his team. The air was thick with tension, and everyone was on edge. "We've got a lot of noise right now," Ethan began. "But we're not backing down. We've proven the technology. Now it's about strategy. We need to beat the competition on every front, technologically, politically, and socially. We can't let anyone outpace us." Rachel nodded. "The regulatory game is critical. We need to make sure we have the support of as many city officials as possible. If we can win them over, the competition won't stand a chance." Tom, always the realist, added, "We need to make sure the AI stays ahead of the curve. If we let the competition improve their systems faster than we can, we'll lose the edge. We can't afford to let our tech fall behind." Ethan took a deep breath, looking at the team. He could see the exhaustion in their eyes, but there was also something else: determination. They had all come this far together. Now, they had to see it through. "We're going to fight for this," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. "This is bigger than any one company. It's about the future of transportation, the future of our cities. We'll push through. We'll show everyone that we're the ones who can make this work." In the weeks that followed, the team worked around the clock to prepare for the launch in several new cities. They ramped up their PR campaign, making sure to address the concerns raised by critics while simultaneously showcasing the benefits of their technology. Ethan personally met with several key government officials, working to smooth over any doubts and emphasizing the safety features of their AI. At the same time, the tech team worked tirelessly to refine the system, staying one step ahead of the competition. The battle wasn't just about technology, it was about perception. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan realized just how important it was to control the narrative. The day of the nationwide launch arrived. The first few autonomous vehicles were deployed into the new cities, each carefully monitored by the team as they gathered real-time data. The AI was more refined than ever, able to navigate through the densest traffic, avoid obstacles with pinpoint accuracy, and respond to human drivers with a grace that made it seem almost human. As the first car drove through a busy intersection in one of the new cities, Ethan felt his heart race. This was the moment they had worked for, the moment that would define their future. Then, a text message buzzed in his pocket. He checked it quickly. It was from Matthews. "You did it. The competition's done. Now make it count." Ethan's chest swelled with pride, but he knew this was only the beginning. The tipping point had passed, but now they had to build something lasting. The first few months after the nationwide launch were a mixture of triumph and tension. The technology was in place, the cars were running smoothly, and the media coverage was glowing. But Ethan knew that success brought its own set of challenges. As they expanded into more cities, not everyone was ready to embrace autonomous vehicles. Despite the significant progress they'd made, there were still powerful opponents in the form of entrenched industries, local government officials, and vocal activists who viewed the rise of autonomous cars as a threat to jobs and public safety. And while the team's technology was proving itself on the streets, Ethan knew they were about to face the real test, the political and social hurdles that come with disrupting an entire industry. One morning, Ethan walked into the office, coffee in hand, only to find the entire team in a tense huddle. Rachel, Tom, Sarah, and others were gathered around the conference table, their faces grim. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, setting his coffee down on the table. Rachel looked up from her tablet, frustration written across her face. "It's the unions. They're stepping up their opposition. The drivers' unions have launched a full-blown campaign against us, with rallies, advertisements, and even lawsuits. They're calling us job killers." Ethan's stomach sank. He had expected some resistance, but this level of coordinated pushback was unsettling. "They've got a lot of influence in key cities," Sarah added. "If they manage to sway enough public opinion, we could see some serious regulatory setbacks. Some local governments are already questioning whether to approve any new autonomous vehicle programs." Ethan sat down, rubbing his temples. The unions had a point. Automated vehicles would undoubtedly displace millions of driving jobs. He had expected the backlash, but the intensity of it was overwhelming. "What are they demanding?" Ethan asked. Rachel sighed. "They want us to commit to a partnership with them, offering retraining programs for drivers and a guarantee that no one will lose their job. They've even got politicians backing them, and it's gaining traction." Ethan thought for a moment. The unions had a lot of power, but offering a retraining program wasn't the worst idea. In fact, it could be part of the company's long-term strategy. He had to be smart about this, or the battle would drag on for far too long. "We need to show them that we're not here to replace people. We're here to create a better future," Ethan said. "I want to meet with the unions. Let's find a way to work with them." A few days later, Ethan found himself in a meeting room with the leaders of the drivers' union. The atmosphere was tense as the union representatives, a mix of older men and women in suits, sat across from him. Their expressions were a mixture of suspicion and determination. "We're not here to be placated with empty promises, Mr. Hayes," said a man named Joe, one of the union leaders. "The reality is simple. Your technology is going to put people out of work. How do you plan to make this right?" Ethan leaned forward, trying to remain calm and composed. "I understand your concerns, Joe, and I want to make one thing clear. We are not trying to put people out of work. We're trying to build a future where transportation is safer, more efficient, and less harmful to the environment. But I also understand that change is difficult, and that's why we're willing to work with you." Joe raised an eyebrow. "Work with us? What exactly does that mean?" Ethan paused. He had to be strategic. "We're willing to invest in retraining programs for drivers who are displaced by automation. We're also looking at ways to create new jobs that didn't exist before, roles in vehicle maintenance, software management, data analysis, and more. If we can work together on this, we can transition people into these new opportunities rather than leaving them behind." The union leaders exchanged skeptical looks, but Ethan could see a flicker of interest. He wasn't offering a perfect solution, but he was offering a path forward, a way for both sides to find common ground. Joe sat back in his chair, considering Ethan's words. "It's a start," he said finally, "but we need concrete plans. You can't just throw some retraining programs out there and expect us to buy in." "I agree," Ethan said. "That's why we're willing to work with your union directly to design a program that works for everyone. We'll meet with experts, gather input from drivers, and make sure the transition is as smooth as possible. But this isn't just about compensation. It's about changing the future of transportation, and we want you to be a part of it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, and back-and-forth discussions with the unions. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly to refine their retraining programs, consulting with labor experts, city officials, and workforce development agencies. They even began drafting proposals for creating new types of jobs that were a direct result of the rise of autonomous technology. But despite their best efforts, the unions remained wary. They wanted more guarantees, more specific commitments, and faster timelines. The pressure was starting to wear on Ethan. The public's perception of the company was at stake, and the longer the debate dragged on, the harder it would be to overcome. Meanwhile, in the media, the fight between the unions and the company was intensifying. The news cycle was filled with stories about job-killing robots and the future of work in a world without drivers. It was a narrative that played well to the fears of many, especially those who were uncertain about the rapid changes happening in the world. Then came a breakthrough. One afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected call from a prominent political figure, a senator who had been a vocal critic of autonomous vehicles. The senator, a seasoned negotiator, invited Ethan to meet with him in person. The meeting was tense, but the senator, surprisingly, offered a solution that no one had considered. "You're doing the right thing by working with the unions, Ethan," the senator said, his tone more conciliatory than expected. "But you've got to show the public that you're not just creating a technology, you're creating a vision for a better future. If you can show that your company is invested in the workforce, not just the bottom line, people will be much more willing to support you. It's about the human element." Ethan nodded. "I agree. But how do we convince them?" The senator leaned in. "Publicize the partnership. Show that you're not just about automation. You're about education, retraining, and preparing the workforce for the future. If you can frame the conversation around progress and opportunity, you'll win the people over." It was a turning point. With the senator's guidance, Ethan and his team redoubled their efforts to shape the narrative around their technology. They ramped up their PR efforts, ensuring that they highlighted not just the technological advancements, but also the human side of the story, the jobs they were creating, and the commitment to transitioning drivers into new careers. A few months later, the company launched its first major public workforce initiative, a comprehensive retraining program designed in collaboration with labor organizations, government agencies, and local businesses. The program aimed to provide drivers with the skills they needed to work in the new world of transportation, everything from vehicle maintenance and software support to data analysis and AI management. The move was met with mixed reactions at first, but as the public saw the tangible efforts the company was making to support displaced workers, the narrative began to shift. The once vocal critics started to soften their stance. Even some of the unions, while still cautious, acknowledged the company's willingness to collaborate. Ethan watched from his office window, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. They weren't out of the woods yet, but the road ahead seemed a little clearer. He knew that the fight for the future of transportation was far from over, but he also knew one thing for certain. They were on the right path, and he wasn't backing down. The weeks that followed the launch of their retraining program saw a noticeable shift in the tone of the conversation around autonomous vehicles. What had once been a battleground between the company and its critics was now becoming a dialogue about progress. The retraining program gained traction, and as more drivers enrolled in the program, they saw firsthand the potential for new opportunities, roles they had never imagined existed. But as Ethan watched the momentum build, he knew the real challenge was still ahead. They had made significant strides, but now they had to keep the momentum going. They couldn't afford to rest on their laurels. One morning, as Ethan walked into the office, Rachel greeted him with an urgent look. "We need to talk. It's about the international expansion." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Expanding globally was always part of the plan, but now it was real. The thought of taking their technology across borders was both exciting and terrifying. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, settling into his chair. Rachel sat down and pulled up a presentation on her laptop. "We've been in talks with several cities overseas, and the response is overwhelmingly positive. But there's a catch. A huge one." Ethan leaned forward. "What's the catch?" "The regulatory environment," Rachel replied. "It's going to be a lot more complicated than we anticipated. Different countries have very different standards for AI and autonomous technology. Some countries are more progressive, while others are outright hostile to the idea. Ethan frowned. I thought we had covered the regulatory landscape when we started looking into international markets. We did, Rachel said. But these markets are changing rapidly, and there's a lot of political unrest around the idea of AI replacing human jobs. We've had some promising conversations, but it's going to take more than just tech. We need local government buy-in, and we need it fast. Ethan sighed. The opportunity was enormous, but it was also fraught with risk. Taking the technology abroad would require a new level of diplomacy, something that wasn't part of their initial playbook. He glanced at Rachel. Let's start with the basics. What's the next step? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of international calls, meetings with diplomats, and research into the various political landscapes around the world. The team had to navigate a maze of regulatory systems, market conditions, and public opinions in each region. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was relentless. As the days went by, Ethan's mind started to race with the possibilities. Expanding globally could change everything for the company. It could elevate their technology to the forefront of the world's attention, but it could also stretch the team thin, complicating their mission, and expose them to even more scrutiny. There were no guarantees. Still, Ethan believed in the technology, and he believed in the team. They had already overcome so much together. What was a little more? After a particularly grueling day of meetings, Ethan found himself standing at the window of his office, gazing out at the city below. The hustle of the streets, the noise, the people. Everything was moving forward. Everything was changing. He thought about the path they had taken to get here, the endless nights, the challenges, the triumphs, and the mistakes. He had never imagined, all those months ago, that he would be standing at the brink of transforming the way the world moved. Yet here he was, facing the world's biggest challenge, making sure that the future of transportation wasn't just about innovation, but about integration. And then, he received an unexpected email. We have an urgent request for a meeting. Are you available? It was from Elon Musk. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. They had met once, months earlier, in a brief encounter at a tech conference. Musk had been curious about their autonomous vehicle program, but that had been the extent of it. Now, it seemed, there was something else on his mind. Ethan quickly typed a response, agreeing to meet the following day. He had no idea what Musk wanted, but he couldn't afford to ignore the opportunity. The next afternoon, Ethan walked into a sleek conference room at Tesla's headquarters, feeling a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Musk was already there, casually seated at the head of the table, his usual intensity tempered by a calm demeanor. "Mr. Hayes," Musk greeted him, standing up to shake his hand. "Thanks for coming. I'll get straight to the point. I've been following your company's progress. You're doing something impressive, but I think we can do more together." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Musk leaned forward, his voice focused. "I'm all for the vision you're building, but there's one piece missing from your strategy. You're playing catch-up with a lot of the infrastructure. Charging stations, vehicle compatibility with existing tech, there's a gap. I think we could work together to accelerate your deployment." Ethan's mind raced. "You're suggesting a partnership?" Musk nodded. "Not just a partnership. I'm talking about full integration. We're already creating the infrastructure for electric vehicles, but autonomous vehicles need something more. We can share resources, expertise, and build out a new ecosystem. Charging, AI, infrastructure, all tied together." Ethan considered the offer. Tesla's brand was synonymous with innovation, and their infrastructure was second to none. A partnership like this could provide the leap forward that his company needed. "Are you suggesting we merge? Or just a collaboration?" Ethan asked, trying to gauge the scope of Musk's proposition. "Not a merger," Musk replied quickly, "but a collaboration that goes beyond just the vehicles themselves. Think of it as a holistic approach: autonomous cars, electric vehicles, infrastructure, AI, everything working together seamlessly." Ethan knew this was a rare opportunity, but he also knew the risks. A collaboration with Musk would mean aligning their mission with Tesla's in a way that might reshape the direction of the company. He would have to weigh the benefits carefully. "I'll need time to think it over," Ethan said, his voice steady. "This is a big decision." Musk smiled. "Take your time. But just know, This could be the next step in the future of transportation. As Ethan walked out of Tesla's headquarters later that day, his mind was spinning. The offer was monumental. A collaboration with Tesla could fast-track their global ambitions and provide the kind of infrastructure support they needed to scale faster than ever. But it also meant changing the company's trajectory in ways that were hard to predict. He returned to the office and gathered the team. "We have a big decision to make," Ethan said. Looking around the room, "Elon Musk has made us an offer to collaborate. It's everything we've been working toward, but it's also a big leap. I need all your thoughts on this." The room fell silent as the team digested the news. Finally, Rachel spoke up. "We've built something incredible on our own, Ethan. But this could be the game changer. We'd be foolish not to consider it." Tom nodded. "But we need to make sure we don't lose control of our vision. If we go down this path, we have to maintain the integrity of what we started." Ethan took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. The future of the company, and perhaps the future of autonomous vehicles, was hanging in the balance. And Ethan knew that whatever decision he made, it would shape everything that came next. The days following Ethan's meeting with Elon Musk were filled with intense deliberations. The offer to collaborate with Tesla loomed large over everything they had worked for. It was a game-changing opportunity, but it came with complexities. Ethan had to decide whether to align with one of the most influential tech entrepreneurs in the world or continue the company's independent journey. As the team gathered for their weekly meeting, Ethan could sense the weight of the decision in the air. Everyone was quiet, their minds preoccupied with the implications of the collaboration with Tesla. "I know this is a big one," Ethan began, glancing around the room, "but I need your thoughts. Do we take the plunge with Musk, or do we stick to our plan and remain independent?" Rachel, ever the strategist, was the first to speak. "Ethan, you know my opinion. Tesla's infrastructure and resources could supercharge our expansion. The partnership is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but we need to be cautious. The more we tie ourselves to them, the more we risk losing control over our vision. We've worked hard to get here. Can we trust that we'll still have the freedom to innovate the way we want?" Tom, who had always been the tech visionary of the group, leaned forward. "If we join forces with Tesla, we gain instant access to cutting-edge AI, self-charging stations, and a whole new level of credibility. But that also means we're going to be closely tied to their timeline, their goals, and their way of doing things. It's not just about getting to market faster, it's about what compromises we're willing to make." Sarah, who had always been the voice of reason, spoke slowly. "The technology is important, yes, but the people are what matter most. We've built a company based on our values: disruption, empowerment, and making a difference in people's lives. We need to ask ourselves, will this partnership help us stay true to those values, or will it dilute them?" Ethan listened intently, appreciating the depth of each team member's perspective. He knew this was a decision that would shape the future not just of the company, but of the industry itself. "We've always prided ourselves on doing things differently," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But if we want to take this to the next level, we need to recognize when a partnership can bring something greater to the table. We've built something incredible, but we also have to acknowledge the limitations of what we can do on our own." There was a pause as everyone considered his words. Finally, Rachel spoke again. "We don't have to make this decision right now. We can take our time, analyze every angle, and make sure we're not rushing into something that will hurt us in the long run. But whatever we do, we need to make sure it's in line with who we are as a company." Ethan nodded. "I agree. This isn't just about scaling faster. It's about the bigger picture. We need to take into account the long-term impact on our mission and our people." For the next few days, Ethan and the team meticulously weighed every possible scenario. They looked at the potential benefits of the partnership, as well as the risks. They analyzed Tesla's history of aggressive growth, their corporate culture, and the challenges that might arise from sharing leadership with Musk's empire. But they also examined the alternative, the path of independence. It would take longer, and it would be harder, but they would retain full control over their technology and vision. The question was whether they were willing to sacrifice speed and market penetration for autonomy. As they combed through data and deliberated in the conference room, one thing became increasingly clear. Time was running out. The market was moving faster than they could keep up, and competitors were closing in. The decision needed to be made, and it needed to be made soon. Late one night, after everyone had left the office, Ethan sat alone in the conference room, staring at the screens in front of him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he drafted a message to Elon Musk, unsure of what direction to take. His mind wandered back to the early days. The garage where it all started, the excitement of building something from scratch, and the feeling of freedom that came with creating something on their own terms. But now, the world had changed. The stakes were higher. The mission was bigger than just proving they could build a better car. It was about changing the way people lived, worked, and moved through the world. And in order to do that, they needed more than just technology. They needed influence, credibility, and resources. They needed the kind of global reach that Tesla could offer. But as Ethan sat in the stillness of the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something at stake even more precious than all of that, the soul of the company. The next morning, Ethan called an all-hands meeting. "I've made my decision," he said, looking around at his team, all of whom were gathered in the conference room. There was an air of anticipation, the weight of the decision palpable. "We're going to take the partnership with Tesla." The room fell silent for a moment, and then Rachel spoke. "Are you sure?" Ethan nodded. "This isn't an easy decision, but after everything we've thought through, it's the best move for the company and for our mission. We can't do this alone, not at the pace the world is moving. This partnership will give us the resources we need to scale and innovate on a level we can't even imagine right now. And it doesn't mean we lose our identity. We'll work closely with Tesla to ensure that we maintain our values while building something bigger." Tom leaned back in his chair, processing the decision. "It's bold," he said, "but it could be the game changer we need. We'll just have to be extra diligent to make sure we stay true to what we started." Ethan smiled. "I agree, but I believe this is the right path. Let's make it happen." With the decision made, the team went to work on the logistics of the partnership. They met with Tesla's executives, hammered out the details of the collaboration, and began planning for an announcement that would send shockwaves through the industry. As the weeks passed, the partnership between the two companies became the talk of the tech world. The press buzzed with speculation about what this collaboration would mean for the future of transportation. Would it be the beginning of a new era of seamless travel? Would it redefine what was possible in autonomous and electric vehicles? In the midst of the excitement, Ethan received a call from his old mentor, the one who had first encouraged him to follow his dreams of building a new kind of car. "I heard about the Tesla deal," the mentor said, his voice full of pride. "You've come a long way, Ethan. But remember, partnerships are just tools. It's the vision that matters. Stay focused on that." Ethan smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "I haven't forgotten what got me here, and I won't. This is just the beginning." As the partnership officially launched, the world watched. With Tesla's resources and infrastructure combined with their own innovative technology, Ethan knew that they were poised to change the world. The road ahead wasn't without its challenges, but it was a road they would walk together, one that would ultimately lead to a new horizon. And Ethan was ready to drive it. The collaboration between Ethan's company and Tesla had officially begun, and with it, an electric buzz filled the air, both figuratively and literally. The news hit the streets, the media, and the industry like a shockwave, and before long, people everywhere were speculating about what was next. Could this partnership redefine the future of transportation? Would it change the way people thought about AI, sustainability, and travel? For Ethan, the excitement was palpable. But there was something else too, a quiet determination, an awareness that this new chapter would require more than just merging resources. They had to prove to the world that their vision wasn't just another tech gimmick. They had to show that autonomous vehicles, powered by cutting-edge AI, were the future of transportation, and that this future was ready now. The first few months of the partnership were a blur of activity. Tesla's massive infrastructure was integrated into their systems, and teams from both companies worked around the clock to sync their technologies. Ethan found himself splitting time between his own company's headquarters and Tesla's, navigating the complexities of collaborating with an industry giant, while trying to maintain the autonomy and culture that had made their company so unique. One day, as he was walking through Tesla's sprawling campus, he had a moment of reflection. The energy in the air was different here. Everything was fast-paced, cutting-edge, and deeply ingrained with the sense of Elon Musk's relentless drive. But Ethan couldn't shake the thought. Could this intense culture mesh with the free-spirited, idealistic team he had built? Would their values be swallowed up by the machine of Tesla's ambition? Back at his company's headquarters, the team was dealing with its own set of challenges. They had scaled quickly, and with that came growing pains. Processes that had once been smooth now felt cumbersome. The pressure was mounting, and not everyone was adjusting to the sudden shift in the company's operations. Rachel, always the realist, called for a strategy session. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, motioning for him to take a seat at the conference table. The tension in the room was palpable, and Ethan could sense that something was brewing. "What's on your mind?" Ethan asked, bracing himself. "We're growing too fast," Rachel began, her voice steady but firm. "Our team isn't used to this level of complexity. We've been expanding operations, building new systems, and integrating Tesla's tech, but people are starting to feel overwhelmed. We need more resources, more people, and we need to streamline our communication." Ethan nodded, understanding where she was coming from. "You're right. We're on the cusp of something huge, but if we don't get a handle on our internal systems, we'll lose the momentum we've gained." Tom, who had been quietly watching the exchange, chimed in. "It's not just about the systems. It's also about the culture. We're not just building cars here. We're building a new kind of world. If we lose sight of that, if we just become another tech company that churns out products without a deeper purpose, we'll lose everything." Ethan paused, reflecting on Tom's words. "So, what's the solution?" he asked. Rachel's eyes lit up. "We need to take a step back and focus on what matters most, our core mission. We can't get bogged down by processes that don't align with our vision. We need to put people first, our employees and the communities we're serving. If we do that, everything else will follow." Ethan smiled. "I agree. Let's refocus on our mission and make sure our culture stays strong, no matter how big we get." With that, the team set out to redefine their internal strategies. They created new workflows, developed stronger communication channels, and refocused on the principles that had guided them from the start: innovation, integrity, and sustainability. The result wasn't immediate, but over time, their renewed focus brought the team closer together, allowing them to navigate the complexities of their growing operation with a sense of purpose. But as they worked to strengthen their internal foundation, the external pressure was only intensifying. The media, the industry, and the world were watching. Every move they made was scrutinized, and competition was fiercer than ever. Every day, new players were entering the market, vying for a slice of the autonomous vehicle pie. And some of them had far more resources and experience than Ethan's company. One afternoon, as Ethan sat at his desk reviewing data on their expanding international operations, Rachel walked in with an urgent look on her face. "We've got a problem," she said. "A big one." Ethan stood up immediately, his instincts kicking in. "What's going on?" "We've received multiple inquiries from regulators in Europe and Asia," she began. "They're starting to question whether our autonomous vehicles are truly safe. There's a growing concern about the potential risks of the AI, and some of the governments are threatening to block our vehicles from entering their markets. If we don't act fast, we could lose a huge chunk of our international market." Ethan's heart sank. He had anticipated some resistance to their technology, but this was far more serious than he had expected. Losing international markets could cripple their growth, especially when they were relying on global expansion to secure their place in the market. "We need to address this head-on," Ethan said, his mind racing. "Start pulling together our best data and case studies. I want to show them exactly how safe our vehicles are, how reliable our AI is. If we don't prove our case, we'll lose the momentum we've worked so hard to build." Rachel nodded and rushed out of the room, already on the phone with the regulatory teams. Ethan leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was the kind of challenge they had always known would come. They were disrupting an entire industry, after all. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of presentations, meetings with government officials, and intensive discussions with experts in AI safety. The team worked tirelessly to compile evidence, provide data, and prove that their autonomous vehicles were not only safe but could significantly reduce traffic accidents and fatalities. They had the technology, Now, they just needed to convince the world. It wasn't easy, but slowly, the tide began to turn. One by one, regulatory bodies began to accept their data and give them the green light to operate in key markets. It was a long battle, but in the end, the team emerged victorious, securing their place in some of the most lucrative markets in the world. With the international hurdles cleared, Ethan could finally take a deep breath. The company had overcome yet another challenge, but it wasn't over. The road to revolution was long, and the competition was relentless. But for the first time in months, Ethan felt a renewed sense of optimism. They had made it through one of the most difficult chapters of their journey, and now, with the backing of Tesla, the road ahead seemed clearer than ever. As Ethan's company settled into a new rhythm with Tesla and the regulatory hurdles were cleared, the external pressures seemed to subside, but internally, the challenges were far from over. The pace had only accelerated since their partnership, and the reality of managing a global operation set in. The excitement of expansion was tempered by the toll it was taking on their team. Burnout was beginning to show, and cracks in their once seamless operations started to form. It was an unusually quiet morning at the headquarters. Ethan had just returned from a meeting in California where he and Elon Musk had discussed the next big push for their joint venture. He had barely sat down when Rachel walked into his office, her face pale, a sense of urgency in her steps. "Ethan," she said, closing the door behind her, "I think we need to talk." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Rachel hesitated for a moment before speaking. "We've been receiving complaints from multiple teams. The stress levels are through the roof. There are whispers of burnout, and it's starting to affect productivity. People are working 12 to 14 hours a day, and even with the resources we've gained from Tesla, it's not enough." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. The last thing he wanted was for his team to lose their passion and drive, but the reality was setting in. Success wasn't just about scaling the company. It was about scaling responsibly. "I know," he said softly, leaning back in his chair, "but we've come so far. We can't afford to slow down now." "I'm not suggesting slowing down," Rachel replied, her voice firm. "I'm suggesting we reevaluate how we're doing things. We need to focus on sustainable growth. People can't keep pushing this hard without consequences. If we don't make some changes, we risk losing everything we've built, including the people who made it happen." Ethan's mind raced. He knew Rachel was right. They had been running at full speed for so long that they hadn't stopped to look at the long-term effects. The pressure was mounting, not just from outside forces, but from within their own walls. "I'll talk to the team," Ethan said after a moment, determination in his voice. "We'll find a way to balance growth with taking care of the people who made this possible." Ethan called an emergency meeting with the leadership team. As the group gathered around the table, he could sense the weariness in their faces. They had been fighting nonstop, working to meet impossible deadlines and scale faster than any of them had anticipated. "I know we're all running on fumes right now," Ethan began, addressing the team. "We've accomplished so much in a short time, but we need to hit the pause button and reassess how we're moving forward." Rachel spoke next. "We've been pushing everyone to their limits, but we've neglected the fact that people can only work at that pace for so long before it affects their health, their relationships, and ultimately, their creativity. This company was built on passion, and if we don't protect that, we'll lose everything." There was a silence around the table. Ethan could see the exhaustion in everyone's eyes, and it hit him just how close they were to the breaking point. "We're not going to back off completely," Ethan continued, "but we're going to find a way to make this work in a way that's sustainable. We'll put systems in place to give everyone the support they need. I don't want to sacrifice our culture or our mission in the name of progress. We need to make sure we're taking care of the people who make it all possible." Tom, who had been quiet until then, nodded slowly. "I've been feeling it too. I thought I could push through it, but it's starting to affect my work. We need to reimagine how we approach growth. If we don't start prioritizing mental health and work-life balance, we won't have the energy to continue innovating." Ethan looked at his team, and for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of clarity. They couldn't keep running at breakneck speed forever. They needed a new approach, one that valued people as much as profits and performance. "We'll implement flexible work hours, expand our mental health support programs, and ensure everyone has the resources they need to do their best work without sacrificing their well-being, Ethan said, determination in his voice. We built this company on trust, and that's something we can't afford to lose now. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and the leadership team worked to implement these changes. They created wellness initiatives, brought in new HR resources to support their growing team, and rolled out new tools that helped streamline processes. They set clearer expectations and worked to foster a culture of transparency, where team members felt comfortable expressing concerns without fear of judgment. But just as they were beginning to see the fruits of their labor, an unexpected event threw everything into disarray. An investigative reporter from a prominent tech outlet had uncovered something that threatened to unravel everything they had worked for. The article, titled "The Dark Side of Autonomous Vehicles," revealed serious flaws in the AI algorithms they had developed for their autonomous cars. The report claimed that their vehicles were not as safe as they had advertised, citing a number of accidents where the AI had failed to make life-saving decisions. While the report was based on small-scale incidents, the headline was explosive, and it quickly went viral. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the screen in disbelief as the article spread across every major news outlet. The pressure, once just a distant hum, now felt like a freight train barreling toward him. "This can't be happening," Ethan muttered under his breath, his mind racing. They had put everything into ensuring the safety of their AI systems. They had undergone rigorous testing. But now, the very foundation of their company was being called into question. Rachel burst into the office, her face tense. "Ethan, we need to address this now." "I know," Ethan said, his voice tight. "We'll issue a statement, but we need to prepare for the fallout. This isn't just about our technology, it's about trust. We've worked too hard to let this take us down." The next few days were a blur. The team worked around the clock to compile data, review the claims, and address the concerns raised in the article. The backlash was swift, and the media frenzy didn't help. For the first time since the company's inception, Ethan felt the full weight of the tech industry's scrutiny. But as the dust began to settle, something unexpected happened. Elon Musk reached out. "You've got this, Ethan," Elon said in a message. "Every major disruption faces resistance. Don't let this define you. Fix the issue, own it, and keep moving forward." Ethan took a deep breath. Elon's words were a reminder that even in the face of adversity, they had the strength to overcome. They would fix the flaws, regain the trust, and continue the journey. In the end, the team managed to address the flaws in the AI system, releasing a patch that improved the decision-making capabilities of their vehicles. They also issued a public statement acknowledging the issues, taking full responsibility, and outlining the steps they were taking to ensure the safety of their technology moving forward. The transparency and accountability they demonstrated helped to rebuild public trust. But Ethan knew the battle wasn't over. The industry would always be watching, and with every breakthrough came new challenges. What mattered was that they were learning, adapting, and, above all, staying true to their mission. The road to revolution was filled with potholes, but Ethan and his team were determined to drive through them together. It had been a year since the storm of controversy had shaken Ethan's company. The AI flaws, the media frenzy, and the tough decisions had tested them all, but in many ways, it had also propelled them forward. The mistakes made were painful, but they had led to better safety protocols, stronger systems, and a deeper commitment to transparency. More importantly, the experience had solidified their identity as a company that was willing to confront its flaws and evolve, rather than sweep them under the rug. Now, sitting in the same conference room where they had once discussed the company's uncertain future, Ethan felt a sense of calm settle over him. The space, once buzzing with stress and tension, was now filled with an energy of optimism. His team had weathered the storm, and they were stronger for it. Rachel sat across from him, a cup of coffee in hand, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I think it's safe to say we've made it through the worst of it, huh?" Ethan leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "I'm not sure I ever truly believed we could make it through that mess, but we did. I owe you all a huge thanks. Without your leadership and support, we wouldn't be here today." Rachel's smile softened. "It was all of us, Ethan. You set the vision, and we followed. We believed in what we were building, and that belief never wavered, even when things got tough." Ethan nodded, looking around at the faces of the people who had stuck with him through the trials. They were no longer just a team. They were a family of innovators, dreamers, and problem solvers, each of them contributing in their own unique way. Tom, always the one with the big ideas, spoke up from the corner of the room. So, what's next? Ethan looked at him, considering the question. Next? We continue what we started. We scale, but we scale smarter. We keep refining our technology. We keep pushing for a future where autonomous vehicles can save lives, where AI can truly make a difference. And we don't lose sight of the human element in all of this. Our people are our greatest asset. We need to keep investing in them. The partnership with Tesla had opened doors Ethan never imagined. They were now in the process of scaling globally, expanding into new markets in Europe, Asia, and South America. The future was looking bright, but Ethan knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, some of which they couldn't yet predict. We've got the backing, Rachel said, breaking Ethan's thoughts. But we also need to remember our roots. Our mission. That's what sets us apart from every other tech company out there. If we start chasing profits without purpose, we'll lose everything. I know, Ethan replied. We need to stay grounded, stay focused on what really matters. And what matters is making the world a better place through innovation, not just making money. The team nodded, all in agreement. It wasn't long before Elon Musk reached out again, this time with an idea that sent ripples of excitement through the entire company. Ethan, Elon began in his typical no-nonsense tone. I've been thinking. We've made strides in autonomous vehicles, but what if we could take it a step further? What if we could integrate fully autonomous flying vehicles into the equation? Ethan raised his eyebrows. Flying cars? It sounded like something out of science fiction, but then again, everything about this journey had felt like a dream at some point. Flying cars. Ethan echoed, incredulous. Elon's voice was steady, even confident. Why not? We've already built autonomous ground vehicles. We're already working with cutting-edge AI. The next frontier is aerial transportation. We can do this. The idea was wild, audacious, and in many ways, exactly what Ethan had come to expect from Musk. But there was a spark in him, a flicker of the same vision that had driven him to create this company in the first place. Could they really do it? Could they redefine transportation on both the ground and in the air? For the next several months, the team worked tirelessly on the new project. They faced countless challenges, from perfecting the aerial propulsion systems to overcoming regulatory hurdles. But each time they stumbled, they picked themselves up and moved forward. This was the essence of innovation, to keep going even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The project culminated in a prototype, a sleek, autonomous flying vehicle that was able to take off, navigate, and land without human intervention. The world watched in awe as Ethan and his team unveiled the technology, which had the potential to revolutionize travel, not just within cities, but across countries and continents. It was a bold, audacious leap into the future, and it was proof that their journey was far from over. At the grand unveiling of the flying vehicle, Ethan stood on stage, watching the prototype hover gracefully in the air before landing softly on the stage. The crowd erupted into applause, but for Ethan, the moment was surreal. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for. Every sleepless night, every setback, every lesson learned. As he stepped up to the podium to speak, his mind wandered to the people who had made this possible. Rachel, Tom, the engineers, the designers, the visionaries who had believed in him, even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. They had all been part of something far bigger than themselves, and now they were changing the world. Thank you, Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Thank you to everyone who believed in this vision. What we've accomplished here today is not just a technological marvel. It's a testament to what happens when a group of people comes together with a common purpose. We're not just building vehicles. We're building a future where travel is safer, more efficient, and yes, more sustainable. But most importantly, we're building a future where innovation is driven by a sense of responsibility. A responsibility to the people, to the planet, and to each other. The crowd fell silent, hanging on his every word. We've only just begun, Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. And as we move forward, We won't forget the lessons we've learned along the way. We won't forget what it means to fail and to get back up. We won't forget the power of collaboration and the importance of staying true to our mission. The journey had been long, filled with highs and lows, victories and setbacks. But now, as Ethan looked toward the future, he knew one thing for certain. The road to revolution was never truly finished. There would always be new challenges, new obstacles, and new opportunities to explore. And with his team by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. The future was wide open. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?